Can you imagine? While alien mages were still practicing forbidden spells, the Emperor of the Ages, Valerius, whom I nurtured, had already unhesitatingly pressed the launch button for an intercontinental nuclear missile. That's right, I was reincarnated into a lifeless planet. To survive in cosmic star wars where entire races are routinely enslaved, I gritted my teeth and forcefully and completely rewrote Terra's developmental history. High King Alaric tamed Trexes to form heavy cavalry. God of War Titus sat in a bulletproof command vehicle, flying fighter jets to rob aliens of their ether ley lines. This is absolutely the craziest history of civilizational evolution I have ever seen, bar none. After being reincarnated, I actually crossed over to become a ball. Before I could even figure things out, a mechanical voice suddenly exploded in my mind. Planet consciousness awakening detected. Please name your planet. I froze for a moment, then blurted out, Terra. A data panel fiercely unfolded. It stated clearly that my current coordinates were in a remote corner of the universe. As the master of the planet, I possessed the privilege to nurture life and create species. But when I looked at the panel, I went numb. The planet was dead silent, with no oxygen and no sun, and the temperature was terrifyingly low. With no other choice, I gritted my teeth and spent the initial energy given by the system to forcefully rub out a god-made sun and hang it in the sky. Sunlight illuminated everything, and the glaciers melted. I directly maxed out the time acceleration. 10,000 years, 100,000 years, 200,000 years. My energy points burned like crazy. Single-celled organisms were born. Cyanobacteria covered the oceans. Then came the biological explosion. Trilobites dominated the seabed, and helicoprion hunted everywhere. Some fish crawled onto the shore. Amphibians and reptiles appeared one after another, until the several meter-tall Trexes roared wildly on land, and Quetzalcoatlus tore through the sky. My Terra had directly turned into a dinosaur paradise. Looking at these fierce big guys, I felt incredibly thrilled. If I fought other planets with this, who could beat me? Just then, a golden light flew in from outer space and forcefully smashed into Terra. It was the new Star Potential Award sent by the Cosmic Elder Council. Not only did I get a medal, but I also got 3 free cards: an energy card, a defense card, and the most badass skill card, Beast Taming. Holding the medal, my consciousness was pulled into a virtual cosmos platform. As soon as I landed, I was surrounded by weirdly shaped orcs, skeletons, and elves. A boar-headed halfort came over with a face full of smiles. Star-Lord, please buy my whole family. 1,125 people for only 5 energy points. We eat little and work hard. I was stunned. Aren't you a Star-Lord? The Boorman pointed to the black tag engraved with the word slave on his chest and smiled bitterly. We were defeated. Our entire planet is someone else's spoils of war. Just as I was about to ask for details, a tiger-headed orc walked over, kicked the Boorman to the ground, and cursed, "Trash! Your whole family was just bought in a bundle." As soon as he finished speaking, the Boorman stared in horror, and his entire body directly vanished into ashes on the virtual platform. The Tiger Man turned to flatter me. "My lord, they lost their commodity attribute. I am also cargo. This is the only way we can live." I felt a chill all over my body. This wasn't a game. If you lose, not only do you die, but all life on your planet is reduced to slavery, a fate worse than death. To hell with peaceful development. I am going to forge the fiercest race and crush the entire universe. My original lineage was human, and since there are no humans in this universe, I will mold them with my own hands. My consciousness returned to Terra. I dumped all my remaining energy into a primeval forest, forcefully accelerating the evolution of the primates inside. Time flew by. Humanoid apes over 2 meters tall, covered in muscles, appeared. When several raptors charged into their camp, one ape grew desperate, grabbed a rock from the ground, and smashed it fiercely at them. Bang! A direct hit to the head. These apes had extremely high intelligence and instantly caught on. An overwhelming barrage of stones smashed the raptors until they fled with their tails between their legs. Later on, they learned to polish stone axes and sharpen wooden sticks into javelins. Until one day, a lightning strike ignited a forest fire. They gathered around the fire, both terrified and full of longing. One tribal chief even knelt on the ground, kowtowing desperately, begging the heavens to bestow the seed of fire. This was the day I had been waiting for. I manipulated the clouds, forming a giant human face in the sky, looking down at him from above. I injected the imagery of making fire through friction into his mind and simultaneously taught him a single word. The chief trembled all over, stood up in sheer excitement, pointed at the sky, and clumsily shouted that word. "Human, humans, humans." The entire tribe roared along crazily, their voices shaking the heavens. Thus, the human race was officially born. I bestowed a name upon this chief Ignis. Over the next 30 years, Ignis the Firebringer traveled across the lands of the 7 realms with the writing and tools I had imparted. He taught humanity how to make fire from friction and how to weave nets for fishing, completely ending the era of drinking blood and eating raw meat. When the old man turned 70, all his teeth had fallen out, and he lay on his wooden bed, never to rise again. Before he died, he looked up at the sky and murmured, "Creator Father, I did not fail your expectations. I am so tired, I can finally rest." With that, he closed his eyes forever. I had personally taught this old man, and watching him die left a wave of sorrow in my heart. I directly manipulated the weather. Fierce winds howled, and heavy rain poured down. The entire human race knelt in the rain, weeping bitterly, honoring him as the progenitor of the first flame. After Ignis passed, the prophets Orion and Lyra took over. They integrated the tribes, invented invented astrology and calendars, established marriage rules, and even instituted monogamy. Humanity welcomed its first great unification. Later on, Sylvanus, the god of harvest, rose to prominence. 9 generations of leaders tasted herbs and planted wheat, pushing the population straight past 20 million. But I discovered a fatal problem. Humanity was too comfortable. Terra's combat power was stuck at 9,000 points and absolutely refused to go up. A civilization without war would sooner or later be killed by others. I directly revoked the protection laws of the northern continent. I let the most brutal beasts act as their sparring partners. In that purgatory-like environment, a splintered tribe forcibly carved out a bloody path. They were Ragnar's berserker tribe. When High King Alaric led the central armies to crusade against Ragnar, he was almost beaten into the dirt. On the battlefield, Alaric formed a perfect Roman shield wall. Opposite him, Ragnar wore a horned iron helmet, wielded a giant bronze axe, and led the charge like a mad dog. These northern brutes wrestled with Trexes every day and had absolutely no regard for their own lives. They didn't even blink when blades slashed their bodies, pouncing forward to bite their enemies' necks. Ragnar leaped into the air, his giant axe cleaving down, cleanly slicing a man and his shield in half. Alaric's formation instantly collapsed, and they were slaughtered into a steady retreat. Just at the moment when Alaric was filled with despair, ready to burn his bridges and fight Ragnar to the death, my system panel flashed red like crazy. Warning: Terra's combat power has reached the Tier 1 peak of 10,000 points. Promotion condition triggered. Star War begins. Match successful. Enemy attacks. Terra defends. 30 years until the final battle. If we lose, both the people and the planet will become slaves. There was no time to let them fight a civil war. I intervened directly. Fierce winds tore through the battlefield. Dark clouds pressed down, and an infinitely massive faceless deity materialized in the sky above. Heaven and earth trembled. The bloodshot soldiers below were completely dumbfounded. They threw their swords and weapons all over the ground, and tens of thousands of them dropped to their knees with a thud. Alaric, Ragnar, and the other lords who came as reinforcements all obediently lay on the ground, kowtowing frantically. My thunderous voice echoed across the 7 realms. 30 years from now, the Star War descends. Alien invasion, a fight to the death. Whenever a civilization reaches its peak, a life-and-death tribulation must follow. Are you willing to follow your heavenly father to conquer the stars? Dead silence fell below. The next second, the berserker Ragnar jerked his head up, roaring with fanatical fervor. My northern tribe is willing to fight to the death for the heavenly father. High King Alaric drew his bronze sword and pointed it at the sky. My human race is willing to fight to the death for the heavenly father. The other lords in the back quickly shouted, "Us too." The kings completely submitted, and the civil war ended. Alaric took command of the 7 realms, officially establishing the first empire of Avalon. To prepare for the alien invasion in 30 years, I directly pulled out that trump card, the grade biological card, bestowing upon the human race the racial talent beast taming. A set of profound knowledge instantly appeared in the minds of the entire human race. They suddenly realized they could understand the language of beasts. The entire Avalon Empire went completely berserk. Humans no longer feared wild beasts. They put reins on captured Trex hatchlings, training them into the strongest heavy armored cavalry on the surface. They climbed onto the backs of Quetzalcoatlus, forming the first invincible air force with absolute air superiority. The craftsmen weren't idle either. Iron tools were hammered out, and the most primitive gunpowder was packed into bronze canisters, exploding with earth-shattering force. To survive, everyone was risking their lives. 30 years passed in the blink of an eye. The moment the countdown reached 0, on the lands of Terra, an immensely massive star gate suddenly tore open. With flashing lights, the enemy's army began to pour endlessly out of it. I stared intensely at the screen, wanting to see exactly what kind of monster civilization we had matched against. As it turned out, what walked out was a group of rugged creatures less than 1.2 meters tall, with big noses and faces full of thick beards. Weren't these the dwarves from fantasy novels? I was just about to breathe a sigh of relief when my eyes suddenly froze. These shorties weren't holding hammers. They were carrying long-barreled muskets on their shoulders. The troops behind them were pushing dozens of pitch-black smoothbore cannons. Further back, they even brought out steam airships billowing black smoke and multi-barrel Gatling guns. The deployment countdown ended. A cold mechanical voice echoed through the sky. Deployment complete. The Star War officially begins. Looking at the steam Gatlings and smoothbore cannons pushed out by the dwarf faction, my scalp went numb. Cold weapon dinosaur cavalry exchanging fire with hot weapon steam machinery. How the FCK do we fight this? I stared dead at the holographic sandbox, my palms completely sweaty. As soon as the Stargate stabilized, the enemy planet's chief god, Bor, also descended. This guy transformed into a massive phantom, looking down at Terra from above. Originally, he thought this was just going to be a crushing victory, but when he saw my world full of prehistoric behemoths, the expression on his face instantly froze. He was dumbfounded. Running on the ground were Trexes over 10 meters tall with mouths full of fangs. Swimming in the sea were Mosasauruses over 30 meters long. He had exhausted all of his planet's energy and ground away for 70 million years just to cultivate a single dwarf race. Meanwhile, I only spent a little over 1,000,000 years to forcefully smash out a monster park where all things thrived and competed. Bor chickened out, but an arrow once shot cannot return. He gritted his teeth and ordered the million-strong dwarf army to open fire. Deafening gunfire and cannon blasts tore through terraced tranquility. Dwarf King Nordine took the lead, directing the smoothbore cannon troops to fire incendiary shells directly at a primeval forest up ahead. A massive fire soared into the sky. These shorties thought they could burn out a path of blood, completely unaware of the massive hornet's nest they had just poked. Deep in the forest, countless triceratops were enraged by the fire, rushing out with bloodshot eyes. They lowered their heads, and the sharp long horns on their heads acted like heavy lances, crashing straight into the dwarf formation. Bang! The front row of dwarf musketeers was directly knocked flying into the sky. Right after, a brachiosaurus 20 meters tall and 30 meters long rushed out, dragging its burning body. This was practically a living heavy steamroller. With one stomp, a dozen dwarves were directly crushed into meat paste along with their guns. Fire! Fire! Nordine roared like a madman. Muskets fired in volleys, and steam gatlings spat out long tongues of flame. Countless dinosaurs fell in pools of blood, but the smell of blood completely triggered the ferocity of these ancient overlords. A 15-meter-long Trex braved the dense rain of bullets and forcefully charged into the crowd. It bit a dwarf in one mouthful. With a crunch, blood spurted wildly. Its thick tail swept fiercely, sending dozens of dwarves flying with miserable screams. The dwarves also saw completely red. They grabbed their war hammers, fearlessly climbed onto the dinosaurs' bodies, and crazily smashed at the dinosaurs' heads. This wasn't a war. This was the purest meat grinder. The battlefield turned into a living purgatory. The dinosaur army was almost completely wiped out, and the dwarf race also lost over 100,000 troops, their morale plummeting to rock bottom. Seeing this scene, I issued my second divine decree without hesitation. Air Force, strike. Receiving the command, Ragnar waved his large hand. 12,000 Avalon Air Force soldiers mounted pterosaurs, ascending to the sky to blot out the sun. The reconnaissance squadron, riding small and agile pterodactyls, was the first to pierce through the clouds, locking their eyes dead onto the steam airships below. The dwarves' anti-air firepower network instantly wove into a sea of fire. Multi-barrel gatlings fired wildly, and countless pterosaurs dropped like kites with broken strings. Prince Julian, who was in charge of command, had blood-red eyes and roared, "Ram them!" Those Air Force warriors who were hit in the wings and destined not to survive didn't parachute. Instead, they let out a wild roar, ignited the bronze-skinned bombs in their hands, and steered their pterodactyls into living meteors, violently crashing into the dwarves' steam airships. Boom, boom, boom! Massive fireballs exploded in the sky. Relying on the anti-air gap torn open by the Suicide Squad, 800 massive Quetzalcoatlus finally broke through to directly above the dwarf army. Drop bombs. Over 4,000 bronze bombs rained down like a storm. The dwarves on the ground completely panicked. Bombs fell into the crowd, sending severed limbs flying everywhere. Compared to those blown up, even more dwarves were crushed to death by their own people in a stampede driven by extreme terror. Half an hour later, the human Air Force, out of ammunition and food, calmly retreated. Staring at the sandbox, I keenly caught a detail. While the dwarf army paused to regroup, a few dwarves actually drew their blades on each other, beating each other bloody just to fight over a cheap flask of hard liquor they carried. These guys were absolute alcoholics. I sneered and immediately transmitted my voice to High King Alaric. Gather all the strong liquor and mead in the Avalon Empire, put them in jars, and send the Air Force out again. This time, no bombs. Drop liquor. Alaric was stunned when he heard it, but he still executed it firmly. Soon, overwhelming numbers of pterosaurs covered the dwarf army once again. The dwarves scattered in panic, thinking it was another carpet bombing. Jar after jar fell from the sky and smashed onto the ground. There were no explosions, only the crisp sound of shattering. Immediately following, a rich aroma of wine filled the entire battlefield. No explosion. They're duds. No, this smell, it's fine wine. Top-tier fine wine. One dwarf smelled the alcohol, and his eyes turned green. He lunged like a madman at an intact wine jar. Get lost, that's mine. Another dwarf directly swung his gun butt and smashed it over. To fight for the booze, the dwarves' military discipline instantly collapsed. The lower-ranking soldiers brawled with each other, and some even raised their muskets and fired at their comrades. A million-strong army was forcefully turned into a super gang fight involving hundreds of thousands of people. It was total chaos. I gave Ragnar a direct order: full assault. Ragnar, who had long been unable to hold back, raised his giant bronze axe and roared at the sky. Thousands of archer cavalry riding raptors charged out of the jungle first, sharp arrows reaping the drunken dwarves like rain. Then, the earth shook and mountains trembled. The fully equipped human main force, riding Triceratops, Giganotosaurus, and Titanoboas armored in bronze plating, pushed across like a black tsunami toward the scattered, unorganized dwarf army. The dwarves completely collapsed, throwing away their armor and fleeing in a miserable state. Just then, an extremely aggrieved voice echoed in the sky. "Great Lord of Terra, I, the dwarf race, am willing to surrender." The dwarf god boar couldn't hold on anymore. He revealed his true form, knelt in the void, and humbly begged me to show mercy, promising that the dwarf race would build technology for Terra for all generations. The system notification rang at the same time. Star War victory. The enemy Star Lord chooses to surrender. You may devour him to gain 1,000 energy points, or keep him for enslavement. Looking at the screen, I manifested an infinitely massive divine body without hesitation. Seeing me appear, Boar kowtowed even harder to show his loyalty. I looked down at him from above, my tone icy. Are you done talking? He froze. Those who are not of my race are sure to have different hearts. Terra only needs one god. With a thought, the powerful force of the rules directly crushed Boar's soul. Before he could even let out a scream, he turned into countless fragments and vanished into ashes. Energy points 1000. My cold voice resounded across the globe. From this day forth, the dwarf race is demoted to a criminal race, to toil like cattle and horses for my human race, never to rise again for 1,000 years. This war of national annihilation ended in total victory for the human race. The 1.4 million dwarf prisoners of war were broken up by Alaric and distributed to various parts of the Seven Realms to serve as hard laborers. 10 years passed in a flash. With the help of these top-tier blacksmiths of the universe, the Avalon Empire's tech tree shot up like a rocket. They leapt straight from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, and then took giant strides into the Steam Age. Steam textile machines, steam trains, and multi-barrel muskets were continuously manufactured. The human population also experienced a massive explosion, breaking through the 50 million mark. But problems followed suit. Because the human race needed the dwarves' technology too much, local lords, for the sake of their political achievements, began to treat the dwarves like absolute VIPs. These shorties not only got rich but also usurped the roles of hosts. They hired humans as servants and even beat human commoners to death in the streets when drunk, and local officials didn't dare to intervene. What was more fatal was that a dwarf elder named Noah secretly contacted all the dwarves across the land and initiated a technology blockade. They intentionally drew the core blueprints for steam engines to be incredibly complex. For 7 or 8 months, they wouldn't teach the human craftsmen any substantial content. They even secretly colluded with corrupt officials, attempting to overthrow the Avalon Empire. They thought they did it flawlessly, but they forgot their habit of bragging when drunk. When the news reached the capital, the aged High King Alaric looked at the mountain of dwarf crime files and was so angry he spat out a mouthful of black blood on the spot. Those who are not of my race are sure to have different hearts. The Heavenly Father was right. I have been too merciful after all. Alaric completely tore off his mask of hypocrisy, revealing the iron-blooded fangs he used back when he slaughtered the Berserker tribe. Kill. A purge sweeping across the Seven Realms began. The royal guards followed the maps to kick down the doors of the dwarves, dragging out those dwarf elders who were still hugging women left and right, and beheaded them directly in the streets. In just 3 short months, out of the original 1.5 million dwarves, Alaric slaughtered exactly 600,000 in one breath. He killed until heads rolled and rivers of blood flowed. The remaining dwarves had their courage completely shattered. They knelt on the ground, frantically handing over all core technologies, crying and begging for humanity's forgiveness. The steam engine was finally perfectly replicated. Alaric immediately enacted an iron law. The ID cards of all dwarves permanently locked them into the craftsman profession, forbidding them from taking office for generations and strictly banning cross-border movement. The most ruthless rule was the alcohol ban. Dwarves had to buy alcohol using their real names. The more they bought, the heavier the tax, directly choking off the source of their riots. After the iron-fisted suppression, the human race welcomed an unprecedented golden age, and I merely took a short nap in my divine kingdom. When I opened my eyes again, steam chariots were already racing wildly across the continent. Time ages all men. Even the once invincible Alaric could not survive the blade of time. In year 53 of the Empire, the 124-year-old High King was terminally ill. On the night before his death, I quietly descended into his dream. We sat together like old friends, chatting about the magnificent waves of his life. From the savage era of friction fire to the roaring golden age of steam. He smiled and said, "Heavenly Father, I am tired. I want to go to sleep." I looked at this human king whom I had personally raised and said softly, "Okay." The next day, blood rained from the sky. The founder of the Avalon Empire, High King Alaric, passed away. The entirety of Terra wept in mourning. Once Alaric died, the massive mountain pressing down on everyone's heads vanished. His newly appointed grandson, Commodus, was eager to weaken the vassals and push for centralization, completely enraging the powerful local lords. The former god of war, Ragnar, also breathed his last shortly after Alaric's death. But his sons had long secretly built up their forces, accumulating massive armies. It happened in the second year after Alaric's death. Ragnar's eldest son was the first to raise the banner of rebellion, swallowing 4 provinces in one breath to establish the kingdom of Sparta. Immediately after, the lords of the south declared independence, establishing the city-state of Athens. The old king's own sons didn't want to be left behind and raised their own armies. Macedon was founded in the east, Gaul in the west, and Troy in the north. The perfectly fine Avalon Empire instantly disintegrated, forming a chaotic era of 8 nations vying for hegemony. The flames of war could ignite at any moment. I stood above the starry sky, watching Terra covered in dark clouds of war below. Without competition, there is no pressure. I knew this great schism was the inevitable path for the human race to advance toward a stronger civilization. I took a deep breath, turned to look at the vast and brilliant universe, and secretly calculated the upcoming path of promotion in my heart. Give them another 200 years, and it'll trigger the promotion to a level 2 civilization. I just spaced out, staring at the starry sky for a moment. But when I lowered my head and looked at Terra again, I was completely dumbfounded. Holy crap. In the brief moment I spaced out, Terra's timeline had wildly accelerated by over 120 years. I stared wide-eyed at Terra, which which had completely transformed below. Wait, what heaven-defying nonsense did these little brats invent in these 120 years? I quickly zoomed in for a closer look and was instantly stupefied. Neon lights flashed wildly on every street, and the wide asphalt roads were filled with cars. High-rises stood like forests, factory chimneys blew white smoke, and there were even propeller planes roaring on patrol in the sky. How the FCK was still the steam age. Terra had forcefully leapt into the electrical age. I hurriedly pulled up the historical records of this continent and fast-forwarded to review them. Good lord, when these humans started competing against their own kind, they were far more brutal than wild beasts. When the old king died back then, the Avalon Empire instantly fell apart, splintering into 8 nations. The first to get hit was Athens. They dug up oil in the southern territories and relied on this stuff to crazily develop industry and manufacture munitions, becoming filthy rich. The king of Athens wanted to monopolize it, but ended up drawing public ire. The other 7 nations formed an alliance overnight, and a 400,000 strong army split into 3 routes, completely surrounding Athens like an iron barrel. In just 3 short months, Athens was entirely wiped off the map of Terra. The oil technology was fully shared, and all of humanity directly ushered in a massive energy explosion. Next, Sparta ignited its tech tree, discovered electricity, built generators, and made money hand over fist worldwide. But the one who truly had the last laugh was a newborn empire that crazily exploded its military forces in the cracks between powers the Valerian Empire. Valeria's foundation relied entirely on a group of peerless badasses. The boss was named Valerius. Because of royal grievances, his father was banished from the House of Macedon, and Valerius grew up being bullied endlessly by his royal cousins. He bided his time, grew up, and entered the military academy for further studies. As soon as he graduated, he took his younger brother Claudius and a few close bros, spent their entire fortunes, and bought a lawless enclave from Macedon. These close bros of his were extraordinary. One was named Titus, another Maximus, and there was one specializing in law named Justinian. As soon as Justinian landed, he forcefully conducted a census, enacted draconian laws, used heavy penalties in chaotic times, and completely tamed millions of desperados, forging them into a Cold War machine. And Valerius' blood brother, Claudius, was an ultramad scientist the likes of which hadn't been seen in 10 million years. He cracked Sparta's generator and, generalizing from that, rubbed out the internal combustion engine for the empire. Once the internal combustion engine was out, heavy machine guns, mortars, and large trucks were all manufactured. Even more absurdly, Claudius invented a super building material called titanium silicon mud that was indestructible and could self-repair. Relying on this material, Valeria directly built an unbreakable steel capital city Nova Roma. Even steel behemoths like tanks were forcefully brought from blueprints onto the battlefield by Claudius. Equipment suppression, tactical dimensional reduction. When the Empire's 200,000 elite iron cavalry were unleashed, they instantly shocked the entire universe. Just as Sparta declared war on Macedon, Valeria flanked them from behind. Maximus played out infantry tank synergistic tactics, and Titus executed blitzkriegs and decapitation strikes. The Imperial army poured out in full force, artillery washing the ground, tanks flattening everything. In a mere 10 days, the 2 great kingdoms were wiped out on the spot. Following that, Maximus commanded human history's first flying bomber squadron, subjecting Gaul to frantic carpet bombing. Planes dropped bombs from the sky, machine guns strafed the ground, and in 9 days, Gaul raised the white flag to surrender. Titus was even more ruthless. He led troops straight to Macedon, taking the old capital without shedding blood. He didn't waste words. He took the 327 members of the Macedonian royal family who had bullied Valerius back in the day, tortured them all to death, leaving no one alive. A fierce flurry of operations, and the 8-nation melee was directly reduced to a tripartite balance of power between Valeria, Sparta, and Avalon remnants. Sparta panicked and brought out cruise missiles capable of hitting 300 kilometers away. The Avalon remnants also hauled out a 1,500-ton super cannon. Since no one could swallow the others, the 3 factions simply sat down and set a rule. Whoever first built a strategic weapon capable of destroying a nation in a single strike, the other 2 factions would immediately surrender unconditionally and reunify. Once this rule was set, the world remained stable for exactly 60 years. 60 years later, the mad scientist Claudius, whose hair had turned white, actually rubbed out the mushroom bomb. Truth only exists within the range of a cannon. Several heavy missile launch vehicles rolled into position. The countdown ended, and fire rocketed into the sky. 10 or so minutes later, a missile smashed straight into an empty field next to the Spartan capital. The earth trembled, and a massive mushroom cloud soared into the sky, possessing apocalyptic destructive power. That very night, the high echelons of the other 2 nations collectively slid to their knees and announced their unconditional surrender. The human race was unified once again. Valerius ascended the throne and titled himself the first emperor. With the great unification completed, the emperor brought his old brothers Titus, Maximus, and the rest to the highest holy mountain, kneeling on the ground and gazing eagerly, begging me to manifest. These were my most capable top-tier workers. I absolutely had to give them enough face. I directly mobilized the clouds in the sky, transforming into a 10,000-foot divine body, looking down at the peaks. With a wave of my hand, that sacred scepter symbolizing divine right of kings, eternal empire pierced through the clouds and landed firmly in Valerius' hands. Looking at the aged faces of the emperor, Titus, and the rest with a thought, I slammed down a precious 5 points of energy. A blinding light completely enveloped them. As the white light faded, a miracle descended. Valerius and Claudius directly had their lifespans extended by 50 years, and Titus, Maximus, and Justinian had their lifespans extended by 25 years. The white-haired old men instantly regained their youth, returning to their peak combat forms. The whole world went completely crazy. Cries of "Long live the Empire" shook the continent. My voice, resonant as a great bell, dropped a fierce decree. 20 years from now, Terra will be promoted to a level 2 civilization. Prepare to face the cosmic war. 20 years passed in the blink of an eye. Valeria completely digested global technology, entered the information age, and its population skyrocketed to nearly 700 million. Watching the countdown hit 0, I unhesitatingly pressed the upgrade button. Boom! Terra instantly crossed the endless void, directly ascending to the 10th star ring of the local interstellar cloud in the center of the universe. Surrounding us were alien civilizations eyeing us like tigers watching their prey. I immediately logged into the virtual starry platform and claimed my 9th place gift package on the new star potential rankings. Upon opening it, I burst out laughing like a pig. A full 10,000 points of energy, plus a 2-star cosmic wonder blueprint. I struck it rich. I finally didn't need to pinch pennies anymore. I dumped 7,000 energy points in one breath, leveling up twice consecutively, forcibly stretching Terra's diameter from 2,000 kilometers to 9,000 kilometers. The earth quaked, and tectonic plates tore apart. Terra's oceans were forcefully parted and widened, literally creating 3 entirely new continents: Azure, Sky Profound, and Listening Sea. The place where the Empire originally resided was named the Primordial Continent. I ran to the slave market again, spent 300 energy points, and bought 9 million dwarf slaves in one breath, throwing them all directly onto the new continents to do infrastructure work. The remaining main event was that cosmic wonder blueprint. Good things must be used where it counts most. I decisively dropped 4,000 energy points to protect the human race's main base, the Primordial Continent. Cosmic wonder, the colossal Great Wall rise. The deafening sound of rumbling was endless. A giant wall of obsidian bricks, reaching 140 meters high and nearly 70 meters wide, rose from the ground like a slumbering dragon, securely enclosing the entire border of the Primordial Continent. The gates were divided into 4: Griffin, Dragon, Phoenix, and Behemoth, looking majestic and deadly. This thing was not only immune to all physical and magical attacks in the universe, but it could also permanently boost human morale by 50%. Its most broken hidden attribute was the enemy star gate absolutely could not open inside the Great Wall. This was simply the most unsolvable turtle shell in the universe. As long as our people stayed inside the wall, anyone who came would lose a layer of skin. With the defense line set up, the 5 great legions separately guarded the passes, and the human race peacefully developed for another 46 years. But then another problem arose. After 46 years, the Empire's technological development hit a bottleneck. The most fatal issue was that the Empire's high command was getting old again. The Emperor and the others were already approaching the limits of a human lifespan, and the shackles of their genetics were tightly choking their necks. I couldn't just stand by and watch the Empire's founders, whom I had painstakingly nurtured, die of old age. Since technology had hit a dead end, we would take the supernatural route. I transformed into human form, spent 2 energy points, and swaggered into the Colosseum on the virtual Cosmic Starry platform. Holding the Empire's latest portable video camera, I just went crazy recording the alien races in the gladiator arena below. I watched 20 days of matches straight without even blinking an eye. I recorded a fire elf chanting an incantation to summon a firewall. I recorded a berserk beastman increasing in size to cleave magic with a single slash. I recorded a phantom regenerating frantically after having its heart pierced. What excited me the most were the Empyreans. I clearly recorded the sharp sword aura bursting from the fingertips of an Empyrean warrior, slicing the enemy in half. I also found out a core piece of intelligence. The Empyreans didn't have any cultivation methods. They solely relied on robbing a planet resource called ether ley lines. As long as they absorbed ether energy to nourish their bodies, they could break genetic locks and live for over 1,000 years. Ether ley lines. Lifespan. As long as we crush an alien civilization and steal their ley lines, humanity could master arcane arts and magic, becoming immortal. I brought this video camera full of top secrets of myriad races back to Terra, throwing it directly to the Emperor and the commanders of the 5 great legions. Inside the Empire's highest screening room, there was dead silence. Emperor Valerius, Titus, Maximus, Scipio, and hundreds of other senior generals stared dead at the big screen. In the footage, Empyrean sword auras swept across, phantoms regenerated severed limbs, and all sorts of unreasonable supernatural powers destroyed the arena. I originally thought this group of veteran generals who had fought modern wars all their lives would feel fear seeing monsters that could slice a tank in half. But when I turned to look at them, I was completely stunned. Silence, deathly silence. Immediately following, heavy breathing echoed one after another in the darkness. When the Emperor and Titus heard the voiceover say snatching ether ley lines can extend lifespan by 1,000 years, they stared dead at the high and mighty Empyreans on the screen. There was not a single shred of fear toward a powerful enemy in their eyes. Their eyes were bloodshot red and their breathing rapid. They were a pack of starving, bloodthirsty mad wolves that had just caught the scent of the fattest meat in the entire universe. The fear of their impending end of life had been thoroughly ignited into endless greed. In the quiet screening room, veteran General Titus suddenly stood up straight. his wrinkle-covered face pulling into an extremely cruel, sinister smile. "Your Majesty, I request to go to battle. Let's chop off the heads of these so-called Empyreans and Phantoms. This 1,000 years of lifespan belongs to our great empire." The entire screening room exploded instantly. Maximus, Scipio, and the other founding generals had completely red eyes. They were all panting heavily, acting like a pack of mad wolves that had been starving for half a month, staring dead at the high and mighty Empyreans on the screen. Who doesn't want to live forever? Moreover, by snatching the ley lines, the entire human race could follow suit with genetic ascension. Sitting in my divine kingdom and watching these murderous, fierce generals, the corners of my mouth couldn't stop rising. Military morale was fully usable. Without a second word, my consciousness dove straight into the virtual starry platform and opened the combat record leaderboards. I frantically searched through the top 20 star lords and, with explosive luck, happened to bump into a tier 2 civilization that possessed an Empyrean core with an elf race as a vassal cross star. "Declare war." The system prompt sounded thunderously. The opposing Star Lord had no way to refuse such a forced match. A massive stargate rose directly from the ground at the northwest corner of Terra's sky-profound continent. I instantly slapped the intelligence directly into the Emperor's brain. Valerius issued the highest war mobilization order overnight. The Empire's war machine ran at full capacity. Titus took command, personally leading 200,000 human elites from the Griffin Legion, plus 300,000 fully armed dwarf berserkers, marching grandly toward the Stargate. As soon as the vanguard troops stepped out of the Stargate, the Empyreans on the opposite side were floating in the sky, full of disdain. In their eyes, ugly freaks like dwarves who only knew how to hammer iron, plus a group of humans holding fire sticks rifles, didn't deserve to be their opponents at all. The Lord of Crossstar didn't even look them straight in the eye, directly ordering the 3 major elf legions wind, water, would they raise to lead the charge. Sitting in his bulletproof command vehicle, Titus looked at the intelligence beamed back from the sky on his large screen and let out a cold laugh. Do these birdmen with wings really think they're invincible in this world? The moment the energy shield disappeared, the humans were in no rush to open fire. Several micro-reconnaissance satellites trailed long exhaust flames and shot straight up 50,000 meters into the sky. The Empyreans on the opposite side were bewildered. A few hard-headed gods flapped their wings, wanting to fly up and see what those things were. But by the time they reached 18,000 meters, they couldn't endure the lack of oxygen and air pressure. What did they know about modern aerospace technology? Once the satellites were in position, the entire cross-planet became a fully revealed transparent sandbox map in front of Titus. Every single move of the Empyreans, down to how many eyelashes the Elf King had, could be seen with absolute clarity on the high-definition screen. The other side couldn't hold back anymore, and the Wind Elf Legion attacked first. With the buff of their mage's acceleration, 50,000 Black Panther cavalry turned into a black torrent, launching a desperate suicidal charge toward the dwarf positions. The frontline dwarf commander took a gulp of strong liquor, let out a burp, and fiercely waved the command flag in his hand. Cannons, resentment trebuchets, fire for me. Boom, boom, boom. 10,000 cannons fired at once. Tens of thousands of artillery shells trailed piercing shrieks as they smashed into the elf army. These weren't ordinary artillery shells. They were fully packed with the dwarves' specially made resentment poison gas. Green toxic fog exploded within the elf formation. The elf warriors touched by the poison instantly got bloodred eyes, entirely lost their reason, drew their long swords, and began hacking wildly at their own comrades beside them. Even the Black Panthers they rode went mad, biting everywhere. The charging formation instantly collapsed. A horrifying stampede occurred within the elf army, causing countless casualties. The Wind Elf King grew desperate and immediately sent out the Hippogriff Air Force, wanting to pull out the dwarves' artillery positions. 10,000 hippogriffs pounced over, blotting out the sky and sun. The machine gunners of the dwarf anti-aircraft battalion had been waiting in their trenches so long their hands were itching. Fire! A dense hail of anti-aircraft machine gun bullets wove into a net of deathly fire in the sky. The hippogriffs' magic shields were as brittle as paper in the face of this metal storm. One shot, and both man and bird exploded into a lump of black charcoal, dropping down like dumplings. The Empyrean overseers mixed within the elf army completely lost their patience. Relying on their divine power protection, they spread their pure white wings and forced their way into the sky, intending to rely on their physical bodies to tank the bullets to their faces. But as soon as they took flight, the dwarf helicopter squadron in the sky pressed their launch buttons. Infrared heat-tracking missiles. Dozens of Empyreans in the air were locked onto dead by the missiles. Scared out of their wits, they jumped up and down trying to escape. But the missiles bit onto them like they had eyes. Boom, boom, boom. What bullshit ascendance. In the face of modern anti-air missiles, they were all blown into mists of bloody rain. High in the sky, Mongo, the captain of the 3rd Dwarf Helicopter Squadron, stared dead at the Elf King wearing the golden crown on the screen below. This kid was 270 years old this year, completely broke. He had just recently been assigned an elf wife and was severely lacking military merits to climb the ranks. Brothers, Mongo gave a loud roar over the radio. See that guy wearing the crown down there? Smash him. When we get back, everyone gets a wife. Charge. 1,000 armed helicopters instantly went into a rapid dive from 6,000 meters up. 4,000 missiles simultaneously locked onto the Elf King. The elf mages below nearly popped their eyes out, desperately holding up over a dozen wind walls. But against a saturation bombing of 4,000 missiles, what could you possibly use to block it? The wind walls shattered instantly, and the violent shockwave directly evaporated the Wind Elf King along with his mount in a split second. With the royal flag fallen, the remaining elf army completely collapsed. Hundreds of thousands threw down their weapons, knelt on the ground, and wailed with their heads in their hands. Titus decisively ordered the army to press forward. Tens of thousands of fighter jets circled in the sky to intimidate them, showering down an overwhelming number of surrender leaflets. Seeing this display, and realizing their own gods couldn't even withstand those iron lumps, the remaining water elf and wood elf legions simply raised the white flag directly. A 500,000 strong elf army, along with their trees of life, were all escorted into the Stargate by the dwarves. When this group of handsome, beautiful, point-eared, long-legged elves was escorted back to Terra, the entire internet crashed. Holy crap, live elves! I could play with these legs for a year. Support the Star War. Can the state allocate an elf wife? I'm willing to trade 10 years of my bro's life for one. To thoroughly assimilate this fresh fighting force, the Emperor cleanly and efficiently decreed Alice, the youngest daughter of the Wind Elf King, as an imperial consort. I directly modified the laws of reality, making the human and elf languages mutually intelligible, completely sweeping away cross-species reproductive barriers. The elf race officially became the Empire's second vassal race. With the peripheral trash cleaned up, what came next was the true main event, snatching the ley lines. Titus, that old fox, didn't play by the rules at all. He purposely made the army assume a posture for a decisive battle, with planes escorting in the sky and a 100,000 strong army pushing flat on the ground, heading straight for that small ley line in the center of Crossstar. Seeing this, the three major divine sect masters over there became anxious. This small ley line was their life-extending treasure. They absolutely could not lose it. The three old monsters, who had lived for thousands of years, immediately brought all their elites, abandoned their home bases, and flew desperately to the center of the continent to stand in strict formation. But right when the Empyrean main force had completely gathered in the center, the 1,000 slow-flying, heavy military transport planes in the sky suddenly pulled an extreme drifting maneuver midair, split into 3 routes, opened full throttle, and dashed like crazy toward the empty home bases of the 3 major sects. This was called an extreme base steal. By the time the divine sect masters reacted, spitting blood and rage, it was entirely too late to fall back and defend. Fighter jets cleared the path. A few missiles shattered the defensive barriers. 3,000 human heavy armored berserkers para-dropped straight into the Empyrean home bases. Imperial Captain Thorn jumped out of the cabin, pulled out a high-strength titanium alloy pickaxe from his pocket, and waved his large hand. Brothers, ignore the stragglers. Mine this or to death. Mountains full of ley lines, crystal clear ether crystals, all compressed lifespan and energy taken to the absolute extreme. The soldiers formed groups of 3, swinging their pickaxes and outputting damage like crazy. The excavated ether crystals were quickly loaded onto vehicles. 60 heavy transport planes fully loaded with magic stones lifted off directly, diving back into the Stargate without looking back. A few days later, in the Nova Roma secret military base, the first batch of 60 transport planes slowly landed. The moment the cabin doors opened, an incredibly dense surge of magical ether rushed out. The Emperor, Titus, Justinian, and the other 80-something Ginge-year-old men took a deep breath. With just this one breath, their bones cracked and popped. Hidden injuries left from years of war instantly healed, and even their sagging skin visibly tightened. That feeling of euphoria welling up from deep within their genetics was so satisfying that these iron-blooded emperors nearly cried out loud. Worth it. This war was so f***ing worth it. The Academy of Sciences immediately stepped in to research. They found that although the magic stones could extend life, they would rapidly evaporate when exposed to air. Terra lacked an ether foundation, so the absorption conversion rate was less than 10. Hearing this report, I sat in the sky and sneered. Isn't this easy? With a wave of my large hand, I mobilized the planet's source power and directly sealed Terra's atmosphere tight. From this day forth, Terra would only take in and never let out. I was going to turn Terra into the super-secret realm with the most concentrated ether energy in the entire universe. I directly dropped a divine decree onto the Emperor. Keep digging the ley lines, but take no prisoners from the Empyreans. Bringing them back will only compete with humanity for magic energy. Receiving the decree, Valerius' eyes flashed with a hint of extremely crazed ruthlessness. He immediately contacted Titus on the front lines. The Heavenly Father has ordered, annihilate all Empyreans. Moreover, the Emperor tapped the table, his tone chilling. The land of Crossstar has been nourished by ley lines for hundreds of millions of years. Even the dirt has ether in it. Order the logistics department to deploy 10,000 heavy excavators and industrial exhaust fans over there. Before the Star War ends, dig 3 feet into the ground for me. Drain all their dirt and air, and transport it all back to Terra. Not a single shred is to be wasted. Receiving the order, Titus stood in the frontline command post, looked at the bombers howling in the sky, and grinned from ear to ear. Did you hear that? His Majesty has spoken. Even the dirt on this planet must wear the emblem of the great empire today. For this month, the surviving Empyreans were nearly tortured into madness. The 3 sect masters took tens of thousands of elites and defended desperately beside the holy pool and the last small ley line in the center of the continent. They didn't dare go out and fight because once they scattered, the humans would definitely take the opportunity to steal their base. But being surrounded like this, the oppressive feeling of waiting for death was simply suffocating. Titus laughed coldly. He never intended to send soldiers to engage in hand-to-hand combat with these flying monsters in the first place. Behind the Stargate, heavily loaded military vehicles dozens of meters long slowly rolled out. That was was the Empire's national treasure, the Mobile Ultra-Long-Range Ballistic Missile Force. A full 2,000 missile launch vehicles lined up one after another. Massive cylindrical missiles were slowly erected, pointing straight at the firmament. Looking from the satellite footage, 2,000 swords of death were unsheathed simultaneously. That scene alone would make anyone's scalp go numb. The Star Lord of Cross Star, far on the other side of the starry sky, saw this scene and immediately transmitted a message to the three sect masters. Careful, the enemy has produced 2,000 cylindrical objects with no signs of life, and they are flying toward the sky. The three sect masters were completely dumbfounded. Flying toward the sky? What kind of tactic was this? Before they could react, the 2,000 missiles suddenly made an extreme sharp turn in midair. Their tails spat out violent, raging flames, and at a terrifying speed surpassing the speed of sound, they smashed frantically toward the Empyrean main base. Enemy attack. Form the array. The Empyrean sect master's eyes widened till they almost tore. He violently spread his wings and rushed high into the sky. The three sect masters acted together, and tens of thousands of Empyrean warriors frantically poured their bodily ether energy into the array nodes. A massive golden energy defense shield covering over 3,000 square meters took shape in the sky. Humph, do they really think energy shields are invincible? Titus looked at the screen and lightly spat out two words: deploy MIRVs. Right at the moment the missiles were about to crash into the energy shield, the warheads of the 2,000 missiles suddenly blew open, splitting from 1 into 5. A full 10,000 small warheads equipped with infrared heat tracking rained down like a meteor shower, directly bypassing the frontal energy shield and smashing into the Empyrean army's positions from all directions. Boom, boom, boom. The earth sank. Flames soared to the heavens. The Empyreans' defensive formation was instantly torn to shreds. Countless high and mighty gods were blown into a sky full of blood and flesh. Looking at their homeland reduced to purgatory, the three sect masters' eyes dripped blood. They knew the momentum was lost. Even if we die, we will drag them down with us. The sect master roared. The three astral apostle-level experts turned into three streaks of flowing light, braving the dense anti-aircraft artillery fire, and charged desperately toward the direction of the Stargate. Dozens of Imperial fighter jets immediately met them heading for an interception. Self-destruct detonate. The three sect masters didn't hesitate at all, directly detonating the cores they had painstakingly cultivated for 1,000 years right amid the fighter jet squadron. In the deafening sound of explosions, 27 fighter jets were vaporized on the spot, and 18 Imperial pilots died heroically. This was also the greatest casualty the Empire suffered in this Star War. With the fall of the three sect masters, the remaining Empyreans completely lost their ability to resist and were thoroughly erased by the overwhelming bombers. Total victory for the Empire. Next came the insanely frenzied autumn harvest phase. The Imperial army not only uprooted the holy pool, ley lines, and trees of life entirely, but even listened to the Emperor's orders and brought in tens of thousands of industrial excavators and exhaust fans. Every blade of grass, every tree, every handful of dirt, and every wisp of air on Cross Star that had been nourished by ether was completely drained, sucked dry, and hauled back to Terra. Looking at the thoroughly squeezed dry Cross Star, I decisively obliterated the enemy Star Lord. 2,000 energy points entered my account. Next came the moment to witness a miracle. Hovering in the sky above Terra, I crushed that largest small ley line. Crystal clear ether dust sprinkled over the entirety of Terra like a blizzard. Revive my darlings, I shouted out with wicked amusement. In an instant, Terra's ether concentration wildly soared from 3% straight to 72%. All of humanity boiled over. Taking a deep breath, years of rheumatic old cold legs were instantly cured, and faces full of wrinkles visibly faded. Even the wild grass by the roadside grew like crazy, as if it had been injected with hormones. Inside Nova Roma, the 83-year-old Valerius drank water of life obtained from the elves, coupled with the baptism of high-concentration ether. His originally loose skin rapidly tightened. His head full of white hair turned black, and in the blink of an eye, he actually recovered to the peak state he had at 30 when he swallowed rivers and mountains. Ha ha ha. 10,000 years for the Empire. Long live the Heavenly Father. The Emperor clenched his fists, feeling the explosive power within his body, and laughed wildly at the sky. But this wasn't enough. Terra had no arcane meditation methods. Humans simply didn't know how to keep the inhaled ether energy within their bodies. At the critical moment, the mad scientist Claudius stepped forward again. He utilized the Empire's most advanced supercomputers, running tens of billions of data simulations on the human Bodis 720 acupoints and 12 meridians. Finally, he forcefully used science to calculate a magical codex, the Imperial Great Cycle Ascension Codex. As long as one broke through the core meridians and compressed ether energy into the sea of chi magic core, humans could perfectly replicate the magic system of the Empyreans. The entire human race went completely crazy. Ether Ascension was directly incorporated into the 9-year compulsory education. From elementary school onward, while learning math, physics, and chemistry, they memorized magic circuit diagrams. The military only accepted ascendants who could light up their magic core. The era of universal arcane arts officially descended, Imperial Year 64. The Empire's top soldier, Gareth, acting as the first test subject for cultivation, surged forward wildly. In just 5 years, he reached the peak of the initiate stage with single-arm strength approaching 10,000 caddies. But he was stuck at the bottleneck of the ether core, unable to advance a single inch for an entire year. Veteran General Maximus found him carrying a jug of wine and patted him on the shoulder. Gareth, your heart is too chaotic. Ascension is about cultivating your fate, not your ranking. Gareth was suddenly enlightened. That very night, he resigned from all military posts, took off his uniform, brought only a heavy sword, and began to measure all of Terra on foot. He walked past the steel furnaces of the dwarves, saw the trees of life of the elves. When thirsty, he drank dew. When hungry, he killed dinosaurs. 2 years later, a homeless man covered in dirt with an unshaven face quietly walked into Nova Roma. He came before the arcane monolith I had dropped into the secret realm of Nova Roma, sat cross-legged, and sat withered for 3 days and 3 nights straight. On the afternoon of the 4th day, Gareth abruptly opened his eyes. He pulled out the rust-covered heavy sword from his waist and casually tossed it into the air. Rise! The heavy sword let out a crisp ring and floated steadily midair. Gareth leaped up, stepping firmly on the blade, looking like a high-tier angel descending to the mortal realm, soaring straight up 90,000 miles. The commoners of Nova Roma watching below, including the Emperor and Titus who hurried over, completely dropped their jaws. Gareth pointed his fingers like a sword, aiming at 100 Turtle Mountain in the distance. A terrifying 10-meter-long sword aura flew from his hands. With a boom, it directly cleaved a massive chasm straight through the mountain peak. The human race's first descendant to condense an ether core, the first arcane blade master, was born right then and there. He wrote down the combat skills he comprehended before the divine monolith into a booklet and tossed it into the Empire's royal library. On the cover, 3 large words were prominently written: Arcane Blade Arts. The entirety of Terra bloomed. Some developed psionic weapons, others delved into magic potion formulas. Sitting in the sky, watching this group of cheat-like humans, my heart bubbled with joy. If they developed for another few hundred years, I could take the Imperial Iron Cavalry and directly flatten the Cosmic Elder Council. Just as I was happily watching the show, the metal on my chest suddenly let out an ear-piercing alarm. Warning: Lich King Mordecai has initiated a forced declaration of war against you. The smile on my face instantly froze. Someone actually took the initiative to attack me? I clicked open the opponent's racial panel, took one look, and felt my scalp go numb, cursing with a face full of disgust. Holy crap, how could it be these disgusting things? Looking at the densely packed letters on the panel, I rubbed my brow in annoyance. The undead race. If I really let these skeletons reeking of death breach Terra, I wouldn't have a single patch of good land left. Absolutely no one in the universe wanted anything to do with this kind of disgusting garbage. If you won, all you got was a pile of rotten bones you couldn't sell, completely unqualified to even be slaves. But on second thought, no matter how small a mosquito is, it's still meat. I might as well treat it as a farming spot. I gritted my teeth and decisively pressed accept. The generation location of the Stargate lit up immediately. I looked down and almost laughed out loud. How could his luck be this bad? The Stargate actually opened at the very edge of the Listening Sea continent, a full 3,000 kilometers away from the nearest Skyper-found continent. As soon as the undead army stepped out the door, it would be endless deep sea, a veritable ocean view gate. A Star War has a 1-year deployment period. The Valerian Empire satellites locked onto the Stargate's location immediately. When the news reached the palace, Emperor Valerius unhurriedly took out his phone and called over all the military big shots. I smoothly sent down a divine decree, telling him plain and simple: these skeletons have no loot, treat it as a monster spawning spot, finish it quick, bring out the tech and the big guns. He'll handle the local radiation problem. The Emperor saw it and understood instantly. The Heavenly Father has spoken, so just bring out the big mushrooms directly. Over the past decade, the human race hadn't just been focusing on ascension. The tech tree had equally flourished. The latest anti-air defense systems were deployed 247 inside the colossal Great Wall, and satellites covered the sky with 0 blind spots. For this Star War, the Imperial military finalized the battle plan overnight. The rocket force would fire nuclear missiles directly from the Skyper-found continent to wash the ground first. Once the opposing Star-Lord was bombed into doubting life itself, the Navy and troop transports would push forward, counter-invading the enemy planet to conduct carpet bombing. Simple, brutal, and efficient. Orders were given, and global armories fired up their machines, crazily producing radiation suits. The day the Stargate fully opened, the Imperial High Command gathered in the Satellite Monitoring Center. On the screens, dense masses of skeleton soldiers, their eye sockets flashing with soul fire, limped out of the Stargate. Those holding shields, holding bows, and the necromancers mixed in the back ranks flowed out endlessly, as if there were no end. At this moment, Lich King Mordecai was shaking with excitement. This old guy had lived for a whole 300 million years, stuck at Tier 2 civilization for 230 million years. Over those long years, he had only fought 2 Star Wars because the undead race was too disgusting and nobody wanted to take his bets. Being ignored for so long, this guy had gone completely crazy, getting carried away. He actually descended his true phantom form above Terra, roaring arrogantly, 200 million years. Finally, someone dares to accept my challenge. Puny bugs, submit. As a result, his laughter got instantly stuck in his throat. His massive consciousness consciousness swept across Terra, and the flame on his skull danced wildly. Over 70 million in population. What the FCK kind of godly race was this? More than the undead, he had hoarded over 300 million years. Looking further down, outside the Stargate was nothing but water, and the giant beasts swimming in the water could swallow hundreds of skeletons in a single bite. Mordecai chickened out. Without a second word, he directly controlled the Bone Behemoths, Death Knights, and other high-tier units, crazily pushing away the cannon fodder in front, turning around and diving back into the Stargate. The Imperial High Command was completely dumbfounded. He just ran away? Valerius sneered. The monk can run, but can the temple? He waved his large hand, and the war mobilization order was issued. The human race dispatched 100,000 troops, the dwarves dispatched 200,000, and the elves deployed 100,000 mages. The massive naval fleet formed ranks on the sea, followed closely by countless troop transport ships. Nuclear-powered submarines submerged into position, and destroyers stood on full standby. I stared dead at the fleeing Mordecai, and a bold idea suddenly flashed into my mind. This old guy had lived for over 200 million years. Even if he were a pig, he definitely hoarded a massive sum of energy points. Now that he was scared out of his wits, he would definitely want to buy defensive god cards. I instantly vanished from Terra, descended directly onto the virtual Starry platform, grabbed the Profiteer Quark, and quickly signed a contract. I used my remaining 1,400 energy points as interest to borrow a grade Fog of War card worth 80,000 and 2 grade buff cards. I threw on a Minotaur alt account, ran to the entrance, and yelled loudly, "Customized god cards, guaranteed win in Star Wars, treating all customers equally." Sure enough, the desperate Mordecai rushed over like a madman as if grasping at straws, slamming his foul-smelling bony hands on the table. "I want to buy. Take out everything useful for Star Wars." I gave him a side eye, pretending to be disgusted. What I'm selling here is the Grade Fog of War, which obscures planetary vision, perfect for stalling. Stall for 10 years, the Stargate closes, and you live. Too bad you can't afford it. Mordecai became anxious. "Who says your daddy can't afford it? How much?" At that moment, Quark walked over right on cue, acting as a shill, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Boss, they'll take that Fog of War card, 80,000 points, right? They'll go gather the funds right now." Hearing this, Mordecai instantly lost it. Terrified his lifeline would be snatched away, he roared with red eyes, "I was here first. They'll take the 2 grade buff cards too. 120,000 points. I'm buying it all." He transferred the energy points to my account without hesitation. Suppressing my wildly beating heart, I shoved the cards to him. Watching my balance instantly shoot up to 120,000 points, I sat on the ground, almost laughing out loud. I got filthy rich. Mordecai took my cards and happily ran back to defend against me. The Star War officially commenced. Fierce winds gathered dark clouds over the sea. The moment the protective shield vanished, the Imperial fleet fired 10,000 cannons simultaneously. Missiles carrying mushroom warheads streaked across the sky like fireworks, drilling accurately into the Stargate. On the other side of the Stargate, Mordecai had already activated the Fog of War, blocking his undead army tightly at the entrance, setting up an absolute defense formation. He had just wanted to catch his breath when a missile came howling in. The leading Death Knight drew his bone sword and struck the missile accurately. Boom! A massive mushroom cloud rose from the ground. The terrifying shockwave instantly blew the surrounding undead into the sky, and the skeletons in the center of the explosion turned to ash on the spot. One after another, mushroom clouds blossomed across the undead planet. The buff cards Mordecai bought for 120,000 points weren't even worth a fart in the face of nuclear radiation. 3 days later, dwarf warriors wearing heavy radiation suits and holding giant shields marched steadily through the Stargate. Detectors showed this world had no oxygen, so they could only fight in shifts wearing oxygen masks. At this point, Mordecai was in utter despair. He looked up at the nukes flying all over the sky and gave up struggling. The system prompt sounded in my ears. The opponent requests to surrender. "Do you accept?" I sneered. "Refused. Convert to energy. The winner is king, the loser is the bandit. This is the law of the universe. If I were soft-hearted today, it would be Terra getting bombed to dust tomorrow." With a single command from me, Mordecai turned into fragments and dissipated. "Congratulations on winning the Star War. Received 50 extra energy from the opponent. Energy 12,015 points. God cards have been returned to inventory. Obtained the opponent's companion relic, Ossuary Abyss LV.6. Total victory. Not only did I net 12,000 points and get all the god cards back, but I also looted a level 6 Ossuary Abyss. With a wave of my hand, the army instantly withdrew to Terra, and the Stargate completely dissipated. I casually sucked all the overflowing radioactive toxic gas on Terra out to the edges of the universe. Looking at the balance hitting 118,015 points, I felt like I was walking on air. Money shouldn't just sit there. It must be immediately converted into combat power. I charged back to the Starry platform, heading straight for the top-tier official auction house. With energy points over 100,000, I was directly invited into the VIP booth by a fox girl. This place was crazy expensive. A small ley line was 8,000, and a medium ley line spiked straight to 82,000 points. Gritting my teeth, I dropped exactly 90,000 to buy 1 medium and 1 small ether ley line. Next, I spent 10,000 points to buy a mech tech tree. When the fox girl handed it over, I took a rough glance and my heart skipped a beat. mechanical heart, mech synthesis, spatial jumps, plasma weapons. This wasn't level 2 tech at all. Even level 3 tech got mixed in. That old fox Quark was absolutely a big shot with sky-high connections, using the auction house's hands to send me cheats. I quickly paid and left, not daring to stay a second longer. Returning to Terra, I immediately began upgrading the planet. Dropping 10,000 energy points, Terra trembled violently. Its volume instantly expanded, the diameter exploding from 9,000 kilometers to 15,000 kilometers. The newly partitioned 3 continents surfaced from the ocean in a triangular formation. As the planet grew larger, the ether concentration began to plummet. I crushed that small ley line, and ether energy fell like golden rain, eventually stabilizing the global ether at 37. Next was the main event. Using supreme divine power, I forcibly carved out an independent pocket dimension with a 4,000 kilometer diameter in the sky. I buried that astronomical-priced medium ley line at the deepest part, then threw the captured level 6 ossuary abyss inside. Finally, I hung an artificial mini-sun and set down the laws of heaven and earth. First, a time ratio of 10 to 1. 1 year outside, 10 years inside. Second, inside the secret realm, lifespans are locked. Once inside, you achieve immortality. Third, the undead are zoned by level. The first 3 years are safe. After 3 years, low-level skeletons riot. After 5 years, death knights hunt you down. A 10-year cycle. Want immortality? You can have it, as long as you can survive the jaws of these mad dog undead. I named this place the Genesis Realm, scattering 1,000 keys directly, manifesting them as a divine decree on Valerius' desk. The instructions were clear. Hold a global arena tournament. Fight for the keys with your own abilities. The moment the Emperor saw the word immortality, he was so excited he trembled all over, almost announcing his abdication on the spot, wanting to take his old brothers inside to ascend. It was the Judge Justinian who had a sharp eye, taking a magnifying glass to read the microscopic tyrannical clauses in the corner, warning with a numb scalp, "Your Majesty, this is no blessed land of immortality. This is clearly a death trial ground set up by the Heavenly Father." The Emperor finally calmed down. Then, the Imperial war machine ran at full throttle. Claudius hugged the mech tech tree I bestowed and dove straight into his laboratory. The National Arena Tournament directly ignited Terra's boiling enthusiasm. The 3 main bracket student, military, and social opened entirely. Countless ascendants stuck at the peak of the initiate stage got red eyes, fighting until their heads bled in the arena to compete for those few hundred key spots. Military big shots like Leon and Gaius successfully broke through to Ether Core Foundation establishment stage while in dire straits. Leo and Colin, the 2 clowns from the Royal Military Academy, also relied on sheer ruthlessness to fight their way out, snagging the champion and runner-up spots of their school. But looking at this group of people, I still felt it wasn't enough. Life on Terra had been too comfortable. Even with tournaments, these warriors lacked true, blood-drawing killing intent in their eyes. If this group left the beginner village and ran into an advanced civilization, they would absolutely be butchered like noobs. I had to give them some real intensity. I originally wanted to buy a few drops of dragon blood to evolve the dinosaurs on Terra into magical beasts, forcing humans to fight for their lives. But when I asked Quark, the Elder Dragon race was all in the top 5-star rings of the galaxy. Any random one pulled out could slaughter a planet, and dragon blood was so rare you simply couldn't buy it. If you can't buy dragon blood, you can get something else. Quark crossed his legs, pointing me in the right direction. For instance, the Elves' World Tree. As long as you gather the 6 trees of Lifelight, Dark, Fire, Earth, Thunder, and Metal, they can automatically merge. Not only can it nurture 11 elements of magic elves, but it also automatically purifies planetary ether. Package deal, 6,000 points. My eyes lit up. Right now, Terra only had the most basic arcane system. If we could complete the 12 systems of magic and even produce necromancers, then it would be a perfect dual cultivation of magic and martial arts. Combat power would absolutely double. Without a second word, I smashed all my remaining balance into it. I not only bought all 6 trees of life, but also bought 2 million elves of various affinities in one go. I spent every last cent, but my foundation was thoroughly solid. Holding the newly merged 12-element magical source, I followed my senses to locate the current Elf Queen's coordinates, preparing to drop a divine decree to have them establish a magic guild. But as soon as my gaze locked on, I was completely stunned. Looking at the 2 intertwined figures on the screen, the corners of my mouth twitched hard. This damn Valerius was actually hugging the Elf Queen in bed, discussing human anatomy in broad daylight. I didn't bother with nonsense, dropping the divine decree directly onto their headboard, ordering the immediate establishment of the magic guild. Then, I coalesced a pure white giant hand in the sky, uprooting the 3 trees of life in the elf territory in one grab. Immediately after, I tossed out the 6 new trees I spent all my savings on. The 9 trees merged into one, erupting with dazzling light, crazily devouring Terra's ether energy, finally concentrating into a 9-colored seed. I tossed the seed into the secret realm, watering it like crazy with high-concentration magic water. The seed broke its shell and sprouted, growing 11 crystal clear branches. This thing couldn't just nurture wind, fire, water, lightning, and other 12-element magic elves. It could automatically absorb waste gas and exhale extremely pure mid-level ether. I named it Yggdrasil and tossed it straight back into the core of the elf territory. The moment its roots pierced deep into the ground, 35 million elves knelt on the ground, kowtowing frantically. The dwarves and humans also followed, roaring at the sky, praising the Heavenly Father. With this, Terra's magic system was fully completed, and the era of dual cultivation of magic and martial arts officially began. With all this done, my mind shifted lifted, and I charged straight back to the virtual starry platform. Quark, this old fox, continuously slipping me top-tier god cards and advanced tech wasn't just him doing charity. I pushed open the doors of the top auction house's VIP booth, and at a glance, I saw him wearing a gorgeous black tailcoat, his deathly pale skin contrasting with blood-red pupils, sitting on the sofa with his hands crossed, acting all imposing. I walked over, sat my butt down right across from him, and directly exposed his secret. "Stop pretending, Quark, your vampire stench is way too strong." Quark's expression drastically changed, his red eyes almost popping out. After several probes, he finally sighed and gave me the bottom line. It turned out he was the Star Lord of a level 3 civilization. Right after ascending, he was forcefully enslaved by the level 4 feudal lord Titan, Lord Hyperion, signing a 50 billion year contract of indentured servitude. He moonlighted as the administrator of this star sector, secretly selling me top-tier resources at low price. It was all a gamble. Gambling that my potential could propel me to a level 4 civilization, helping him resist Hyperion's Titan family when his contract expired 100 million years later. Facing a massive level 4 behemoth that commanded over 3,000 vassal planets, anyone else would have wet their pants. But I didn't even frown, slapping my thigh and laughing loudly. "Save it. If I get desperate, it'll directly ascend to level 5 and FCK him up." Quark trembled with excitement and roared with laughter at the sky. I accepted this long-term venture capital investment. Pocketing the resources Quark maxed out for me, I returned to the Genesis realm. It was time to give Terra some real intensity. These ascendants of the human race were meditating behind closed doors every day, lacking the bloodlust of life and death combat. I extracted the blood essence of several hundred Western elder dragons, caught Terrace dinosaurs, titanoboas, and various beasts and birds, and forcefully poured it down their throats. Time acceleration engaged. 500 years of time passed with the snap of a finger. Stimulated by dragon blood and nourished by ether, these beasts shed their feral nature, awakened their sentience, and completely transformed into high-tier magical beasts capable of independently absorbing the essence of heaven and earth. The most outstanding among them were 2 titanoboas. Their bodies didn't grow larger but shrank to less than 10 meters, turning into a white and a green twin-horned sea monster leviathan, their eyes incredibly expressive. I casually named them Pearl and Emerald. I rolled up this group of evolved monsters into a bundle and threw them all onto the listening sea continent 1,000 miles away, leaving them to develop on their own. After setting up the monster zone, I turned my gaze to the human beginner village. Inside the Imperial Zoo, a fat and a skinny student, both at the peak of the initiate stage, were wandering around riding a tamed raptor. The skinny one was Colin, the fat one was Leo. Both had supreme talent but were stuck at a bottleneck, refusing to break through. I sneered, flicked my finger, and a drop of volatile black dragon essence accurately smashed into the raptor's body. The raptor, which had been as docile as a dog a second ago, instantly had its eyes turn bloodshot red. It gave a wild roar, pierced the beast tamer's heart with a single claw, turned around, opened its bloody maw, and lunged straight at Colin and Leo. "Run!" Colin was scared out of his wits, doing a donkey roll on the spot to dodge the lethal bite. Leo was directly thrown off, skidding several meters face first on the ground. When he looked back, the dinosaur's fangs were right against his butt. The instinct to survive ignited the ferocity in these two kids. With nowhere to retreat, they had to fight for their lives. Colin picked up a half-meter-long rusted rebar, stared dead at the lunging behemoth, and delivered a frontal thrust, stabbing fiercely right into the raptor's left eye. Blood splattered wildly. The dinosaur roared in agony, smashed the rebar in two with a single swipe of its claw, and opened its mouth to bite Colin's neck. In the nick of time, Leo rushed up with a weird scream, holding his own rebar, and thrust it upward violently, piercing straight through the raptor's abdomen. The two coordinated perfectly, flanking from left and right. Seizing the right moment, one thrust a rebar into the dinosaur's lower jaw, and the other gave it a direct 1,000 years of death up the rear. The massive body of the raptor crashed to the ground, dead as a doornail. Colin and Leo slumped in the pool of blood, completely drained of strength. In that exact moment, the great terror between life and death transformed into the catalyst for breakthrough. Their seas of chi roared, and ether vortexes surged into their bodies. As water flows to form a channel, both successfully condensed an ether core. This surveillance video instantly blew up the whole internet. Countless Imperial ascendants stuck at bottlenecks suddenly understood. So breaking through couldn't just rely on meditation. You had to see blood. For a time, jungle experience centers opened like crazy all over the country, and hunting magical beasts became the hottest method of cultivation. Meanwhile, in the lab, Claudius relied on the mech tech tree blueprints I bestowed and successfully ignited controlled nuclear fusion. Humanity thoroughly entered an era of limitless energy. Nano armor, super chips, and mechanical hearts successively went into production. The Empire's war machine began a comprehensive generational upgrade. At the same time, the anomalies on the listening sea continent finally drew the attention of the Imperial military. A transport plane flew over the sea region, and 9 fully armed special ops members leaped out. The one leading the team was exactly Captain Tiberius, a master who had condensed an ether core. Before they even took 2 steps after landing, tens of thousands of terrifyingly large magical beasts lunged out of the surrounding forest, surrounding them so tightly that not a drop of water could leak through. Cold sweat poured down Tiberius' face. His hand rested on his sword hilt, not even daring to breathe loudly. Immediately after, the sea surface burst open, and a white and a green leviathan, both over 3 meters long, soared into the sky. With twin horns on their heads and 4 claws on their bellies, they looked extremely ferocious. The most terrifying thing was that the white leviathan stared at Tiberius and actually spoke human language with perfect articulation. "Hello, my name is Pearl." Tiberius' entire team had their worldviews shattered. These weren't beasts at all. These were magical beast lords. Sitting high in the clouds, seeing that the timing was right, I directly dropped a divine decree. From this day forward, all beings on Terra, whether magical beasts or ascendants, to break through to a major realm, you must withstand a divine tribulation etheric storm. Endure it and be reborn. Fail, and your body and soul will be destroyed. The moment the words fell, the sky over the listening sea continent was instantly covered in dark clouds, and lightning serpents danced wildly. This was Terra's first ever lightning tribulation. It was incredibly brutal. 135 sentient magical beasts were locked onto by the thunder, which struck down one after another. Wails of agony echoed to the heavens. After one round of lightning strikes, only 7 magical beasts staggered to their feet. The rest were all blasted into charcoal. This cruel survival rate left the humans of Terra, watching in front of their live stream screens, scared with freezing hands and feet. For 20 whole days, the lightning tribulation continued. Out of tens of thousands of magical beasts, only 531 survived in the end. But the group that survived were all absolute monsters, especially the 4 prototype divine beasts that I personally modified using evolution god cards: the white tiger, the Quetzalcoatlus turned phoenix, the giant turtle and snake combined into a behemoth, and the white leviathan, Pearl. The lightning striking their bodies was basically like getting a massage. It didn't even damage a single scale. When the tribulation ended, the Imperial military issued a new command: keep Tiberius' squad on the listening sea continent to serve as instructors, teaching the magical beasts human writing, while conveniently probing the combat limits of these monsters. Receiving the order, Tiberius picked the white leviathan Pearl, who seemed to have the best temper. He felt that since this sea monster was only 3 meters long, and he was a dignified tier 2 ether core, handling it would be a piece of cake. Pearl, care to spar? Tiberius drew his superconducting heavy sword, poured magic power through his entire body, and the blade erupted with a blinding golden light. He shouted loudly, unleashing his ultimate move, Holy Sword Thrust. A sharp golden sword aura, like a living venomous snake, tore through the air, heading straight for Pearl's face. Pearl blinked, opened her mouth slightly, and spat out a mouthful of transparent liquid with a crack. The moment that violent sword aura came into contact with the liquid, it was instantly frozen into a giant block of ice, dropping to the ground with a clatter and shattering into pieces. Tiberius' eyes almost popped out as he yelled in horror. What kind of magic is this? Pearl tilted her massive head, her face full of innocence. Spitting, obviously. Tiberius was so furious he spat blood on the spot. Unable to save face, he grew angry from embarrassment and signaled the 8 brothers behind him. Attack together. Form the array. 9 elite special ops members, at the peak of core and initiate stages, pulled out their meteor hammers and power hammers, surrounding her with murderous intent. Pearl seemed to think it was quite fun. She let out an excited roar and soared into the sky. Under everyone's horrified gazes, her originally 3-meter-long body instantly ballooned. 5 meters, 10 meters, 21 meters. A terrifying, sun-blotting deep-sea behemoth coiled high in the sky, the shadow it cast trapping the 9 men dead in its grasp. Before Tiberius could even yell surrender, Pearl's massive body dove down fiercely, wrapping them up tightly with her tail like rolling a pancake, pulling straight off the ground and rushing into the clouds. Ah! Miserable screams echoed across the listening sea continent. Pearl played the giant windmill in the sky, spinning these special forces soldiers until they were dizzy and vomiting bile wildly. When Pearl landed and loosened her tail, the 9 men fell into a pile, crawling and rolling to the base of a tree, puking their guts out. Far away in the imperial palace of Nova Roma, there was dead silence. The emperor stared dead at the behemoth on the big screen, turning to look at the empire's #1 sword master, Gareth, beside him. Can you win? Gareth's face was solemn as he slowly spat out a few words. No chance at all. This magical beast's realm has absolutely reached the level of an astral apostle golden core stage. Hearing the empire's #1 expert say this, the emperor's heart completely sank. On the listening sea continent, Tiberius' squad thoroughly became the exclusive punching bags for these magical beasts. Every day they kept them company eating, chatting, and sparring, getting beaten until their eyes went black and heads spun every single day. But a beating is still a beating. Under the magical beast's innate healing skills and high-intensity real combat, in just 7 days, Tiberius shot up to a tier 3 ether core, and the 8 brothers under him all achieved breakthroughs. 3 days later, the Genesis realm was about to open. Military helicopters came to evacuate Tiberius. He specifically ran to Pearl, intending to act tough. Pearl, we're going to the sacred ground left by the Heavenly Father. 10 years inside is 1 year outside. When we come out, we'll fight again. Pearl tilted her massive head, asking in confusion, no need to separate, we're going to. Tiberius froze. Pearl extended her claw, and behind her, over 500 Lord-level magical beasts pulled out keys in unison. Tiberius and his group stared blankly, collectively swearing. Turns out they got guaranteed spots just by surviving the storm tribulation. Tiberius' old face flushed red. He waved his hand and led his brothers away, climbing into the helicopter with his tail between his legs. On the other side, at the military assembly point, Colin and Leo, those two clowns, were madly stuffing soda, spicy strips, and popcorn into their backpacks. Leo muttered, "Bring some snacks. If we run into magical beasts, we might be able to get on their good side." Their rival from the Royal Academy, Fendrel, happened to hear this and held his stomach, laughing wildly. "Look everyone, these two idiots are bringing spicy strips to feed the magical beasts. Ha ha ha, I'm dying of laughter." The crowd joined in the roaring laughter, discarding the snacks they had planned to bring and swapping them for rock-hard compressed biscuits. Colin and Leo rolled their eyes, too lazy to bother with this crowd, and carried their 2 huge bags of snacks as they strode into the spatial vortex. As soon as they entered the secret realm, ether energy so dense it formed a mist rushed at their faces. Everyone sat cross-legged on the spot, sucking it in frantically like starving ghosts. For 3 whole years, everyone cultivated behind closed doors like their lives depended on it. With the energy buff, everyone condensed an ether core. Aside from ascension meditation, some loved potions, some loved magitech, and even the elves and dwarves utilized their specialties to become magic scroll masters and runic array masters. 100 flowers bloomed. Once the 3-year protection period ended, the undead skeletons deep within the secret realm were unleashed. By now, Leo had charged to core tier 6. He flew to a large lake and, seeing no one around, stripped naked and jumped in for a bath, whistling as he swam. He had no idea that at the bottom of the lake coiled a deep-sea behemoth at the astral apostle level. Pearl was woken up at the bottom of the lake. Looking up, she saw a chubby human splashing around Buck naked in the water, occasionally blowing a couple of bubbles. Her playful side acting up, Pearl manipulated the water into a fine needle and stabbed it fiercely into Leo's butt. Aru. Leo covered his bleeding rear and rocketed straight into the sky. Colin happened to fly over, saw his childhood friend with a bare butt, and almost sprayed the magic potion he just drank. Before the two could react, the lake water exploded and Pearl's massive body soared into the sky. The two shivered in fright and fell straight back into the water. Leo's brain spun fast. He climbed ashore, wiped his face, and forced a flattering smile. "Sister Pearl, we're your fans. We specifically brought you good food." Pearl's eyes lit up. "Fans? Are they edible?" Colin quickly followed up. "Fans aren't edible, but we can roast fish for you." As soon as the words left his mouth, a wandering necromancer in the distance raised its bone staff. A sickly green corrosive arrow veered wildly off course, accurately blowing up the 2 backpacks filled with snacks. The 2 were so angry they saw stars, and just as they were about to draw their swords to fight for their lives, Pearl casually flicked a finger. The bone staff shattered, and the skeleton mage fell to pieces on the spot. Pearl turned to stare at the 2, drool dripping from the corner of her mouth. Where's the food? No other choice. Colin and Leo could only stay shirtless, obediently jump into the lake to catch spirit fish and start a fire to roast them. Pearl ate until her eyes narrowed in bliss, directly appointing the 2 as her royal chefs. From that day on, while everyone outside was chased like rats by the undead, these 2 brothers stayed by the lake roasting fish every day, relying on the protection of the astral monster to survive smoothly until the secret realm closed. By comparison, Gareth's experience was much more thrilling. Single-handedly, he slaughtered his way through the outer edges of the undead, charged all the way deep inside, and successfully condensed an astral core while resisting the pressure. Becoming Terra's first human astral apostle, Gareth was full of heroic ambition. With his hands behind his back, he stood in midair, thousands of arcane sword auras coalescing behind him, and shouted, "Go!" A rain of swords instantly cleared out a massive swath of skeletons. He was just about to flick his sleeves and leave stylishly. Suddenly, a death knight radiating blue fire charged out from the depths of the undead, riding a black-bone horse through the air, thrusting a spear straight at his throat. Unbelievably fast. Immediately after, for more death knights of the exact same level broke through the earth, locking onto him dead. Holy crap, the peerless sword saint of 1 second ago suffered an instant mental breakdown in the next, turning around and running for his life. The 5 death knights haunted him relentlessly, chasing him as he ran circles frantically around the entire secret realm. When passing by the lake, he even saw Colin and Leo casually flipping a roasting fish for Pearl. That damned sense of contrast. The countdown hit 0 and the secret realm closed. Everyone was forcefully ejected. The 800 or so survivors experienced a massive spike in strength. Leo reached core tier 7, Colin tier 6, and Gareth became an astral apostle. As for Fendrel, who had mocked them before entering, he was chased like a dog by the undead right after breaking through to core tier 2. Getting so scared he exited the secret realm early, regretting it until his intestines turned green. Time flies, the years weave like a shuttle. 200 years passed with the snap of a finger. I woke up again. My will swept across Terra. The population had exploded to 6 billion. But the problem followed. Terra's ether energy had bottomed out. The number of astral apostle level experts was stuck at 81, unable to break through any further. The laws of the universe are just that much. This star system's energy capacity had reached its limit. To break the deadlock, the only way was to initiate Star Wars, plunder resources, kill our way into the first star ring, and promote to a level 3 civilization. Fighting wars burns money. I had to go pull in some sponsorships. I instantly descended on the virtual Starry platform and kicked open the door to Quark's auction house. After a few hours of crazy brainwashing, brainwashing and bluffing, I successfully squeezed dry the last 7 energy points in Quark's pocket. Upon leaving, I also snatched the medium ley line the fox girl was holding in her arms. Looking at his empty vault, Quark wanted to cry but had no tears. With the capital secured, I had to secure Terra's home front. Lately, Emperor Valerius had been very anxious. Astral apostles could live for 2,000 years. He had long grown tired of being the emperor and dreamt of quitting to do closed-door meditation. If he quit, the empire's massive machine would be paralyzed. Not just him. Titus, Maximus, and the other veteran generals were faking illness at home every day, terrified of being burdened by state affairs and delaying their cultivation. What this group lacked was motivation. In the dead of night, the emperor was so exhausted from reading scrolls, he fell asleep on his desk. I entered his dream directly, manifesting as a 10,000-foot golden light. When the emperor saw me, he felt as wronged as a child, dropping to his knees with a thud and bawling loudly, frantically pouring out his grievances. Too lazy to listen to his complaints, I interrupted. You've done well. The dream shattered. The emperor woke with a start, only to see the scepter of dominion on his desk erupt with dazzling golden light. A massive amount of rule-based information frantically flooded into his mind. I had spent all the energy points I just robbed to engrave 2 supreme laws of the universe onto the scepter, kingship and karma. From this day forth, with the scepter recognizing its master, Valerius was the true monarch of the Holy Empire. He enjoyed a 100 Terra fortune buff. As long as the nation was strong, even if he sat on the throne without cultivating, his realm would still rise. What was even more ruthless was that the scepter possessed a built-in medium ley line, automatically issuing magic stone salaries to imperial officials every month based on their rank. The higher the rank, the stronger the fortune buff, and the more magic stones issued. But if they bent the law for personal gain or oppressed the commoners, they would generate the fire of karma. Minor cases meant going mad in cultivation, while severe cases meant body and soul destruction. Ascension and holding public office were completely bound together. Early the next morning, the emperor, glowing with health, forcefully summoned Titus, Maximus, and Justinian, 3 old men faking illness, into the palace. 3 parchment edicts were slapped directly onto their faces. When the 3 old guys opened the edicts, their hands shook like they had Parkinson's. Monthly magic stones? Official posts come with an 80 meditation acceleration buff. The 3 men slid to their knees on the spot, hugging the emperor's thighs, crying with snot and tears. Emperor, we wronged you. Born as the empire's officials, we die as the empire's ghosts. The internal strife was completely settled. The massive state machine erupted with terrifying vitality never seen before. The entire army upgraded its gear, nanoshields, exoskeleton armor, and high-energy laser guns became universal. I clicked open the cosmic leaderboard, initiating challenges one by one. The top 20 cowards all rejected me. I wasn't in a hurry, just clicking down the list year after year. Finally, in the 6th year, Star War initiated. Human race versus werewolf race. The Stargate smashed directly into the eastern part of the Azure continent. The Imperial military received its orders. This time, no mages or swordsmen for hand-to-hand combat. Send in the technology directly for a grand military drill. Grand Engineer Claudius led the 346th Mech Legion as they moved out. 100,000 combat robots, 1.7 meters tall and covered in cold metallic armor, marched with absolute uniformity, stepping silently into the Stargate. No slogans, no hot-blooded passion, only suffocating execution capability. Satellites launched into the sky, transmitting the full view of the werewolf planet back to Terra. The opponent was a group of extremely bloodthirsty werewolves over 3 meters tall, raising tens of millions of wild wolves as cannon fodder. Once the deployment period ended, the werewolf king roared at the sky. Tens of millions of wild wolves lunged forward madly like a black tsunami. The Mech Legion Command Center issued cold orders. 100,000 mechs raised their laser kinetic rifles simultaneously. Silent beams of death wove into an airtight net of firepower. Lasers pierced through the wild wolves' bodies, their remaining momentum sweeping down the back rows. The earth was instantly dyed red with blood. Using the cannon fodder as cover, the werewolves braved the casualties and forced their way to the front of the Mech Legion. But before they could even swing their claws, the front row of the Mech Legion instantly raised golden energy shields, forcefully tanking the magic bombardment. The back row of mechs reverse-drew high-frequency laser swords, operating in precision groups of 3. The werewolves' claws tore through the mechs' metal bodies, but the mechs that were ripped in half, with their upper bodies smashed on the ground, still coldly swung their swords to sever the werewolves' ankles. No pain, no fear. As long as the mechanical heart in their chests wasn't shattered, even if only a head remained, it was still madly calculating enemy-killing trajectories. 7 days and 7 nights, corpses piled into mountains of meat. The entire werewolf race went berserk, their strength doubling. But they discovered in despair that 300,000, then 500,000 brand new mechs stepped out of the Stargate. The werewolf race completely collapsed. The Mech Legion stepped over mountains of corpses and seas of blood, flattening the entire planet. I decisively clicked settle, obtaining 73,000 energy points, plus a werewolf altar that could mutate wild wolves. I didn't stop, continuing to challenge. 20 years later, Star War initiated. Human race versus goblin race. When the satellite footage came back, everyone gasped. This planet was larger than Terra, had no oceans, and the land was densely packed with green goblins. 100 billion scale, so many that they could only survive by eating each other. Faced with this swarm tactic that didn't even leave room to stand, the Imperial military had no intention of deploying ground troops. 3 massive aerospace aircraft carriers ascended, stopping directly in the stratosphere on the other side of the Stargate. Orders were given, and 3 menacingly shaped heavy satellites detached from the carriers, pushing into outer space. This was the ultimate weapon developed by the Empire after digesting the mech-tech Trisatellita-class plasma orbital cannons. The moment the Star War began, the 3 satellites locked dead onto the Goblin King and High Shamans on the ground. There were no earth-shattering explosions, only 3 blinding pillars of light, hundreds of meters in diameter, descending from the sky like divine punishment. Hundreds of millions of degrees of high-temperature plasma instantly evaporated all matter it touched into nothingness. The pillars of light acted like 3 giant erasers, scrubbing back and forth across the Goblin planet's surface. Wherever they passed, there were no corpses, no whales, only smooth, glass-like craters. The live broadcast of this silent planetary erasure completely shattered the pride of those arrogant astral apostles inside Terra. A few underground magic cults that wanted to stir up trouble disbanded overnight in terror, and their ringleaders smashed their communication crystals directly. I wasted no words with the goblins, clicking settle immediately. My balance skyrocketed to 160,000. Looking at the massive bouncing numbers on the panel, I laughed coldly. Since technology and magic are well integrated, then push all the way through, kill our way into the first star ring for me. Riding this surging momentum, the Terra army swept through the leaderboards like harvesting weeds. In a mere 200 years, I led Terra on a 39-win streak, raking in 1.47 million energy points, and hacked our way straight into the 6-star ring. With spare cash in my pocket, I casually dropped 100,000 energy points to give Terra a massive upgrade. The planet's diameter instantly expanded tenfold, and 30 new continents were forcefully raised from the vast oceans. To maintain the ecology, I spent a heavy sum to bury 30 ley lines and hung a second artificial sun. With the territory expanded, the Emperor went with the flow and decreed a new policy. The Empire would only defend the heartlands of the 7 kingdoms. The new continents were completely open, life and death at your own risk. As soon as this decree was issued, Terra completely boiled over. Countless ascendants stuck at bottlenecks swarmed like crazy to the overseas lands to grab territory. The era of knight orders and cults kicked off with a bang. Amidst this tidal wave, Leo's 2 disciples couldn't sit still either. The head disciple Achilles, born with divine strength, had double pupils and towering arrogance. The second disciple Octavian had mediocre cultivation but was a smooth operator. These 2 kids dragged their newly sworn brother, the mage Merlin, to the new continent and founded the Order of Avalon. Within a few years, they offended the local overlords of the new continent, the Silver Moon Order. This sect had nearly 100,000 disciples, and their Grand Archbishop Lucian was a bona fide astral apostle. After several clashes, the Order of Avalon was almost wiped out. Achilles refused to submit. He felt that studying arcane arts and magic steppy-step was too slow. So he scattered all his magic power and created an unprecedented Path Titan aura. He used berserk elemental energy to forcibly crush and rebuild every inch of bone and cell in his body, brutally dropping his realm back to the initiate stage, and went into closed-door training for 10 full years. 10 years later, Lucian led an army and crushed the gates of the Order's fortress. Octavian, Merlin, and the legendary General Belisarius fought to the death without retreating. Just as they were about to be hacked to death by random swords, a heavy cavalry lance tore through the air, instantly impaling 7 heavily armored knights of the Silver Moon Order, nailing them dead to the wall. Achilles had emerged from seclusion. There wasn't a trace of magic fluctuation on his entire body, but standing there, the air around him subtly distorted due to his terrifying physical strength. Lucian sneered, erected his astral shield, and dove down from the sky. Achilles kicked hard with his legs, and the ground instantly exploded into a massive crater. He shot into the sky like a cannonball, delivering a completely unflashy right punch that smashed Lucian's astral shield on the spot. The sound of bones cracking exploded. The high and mighty astral archbishop was grabbed by the ankle by a pure martial artist with no magic, smashed crazily against the ground hundreds of times like a broken sack, and was finally torn alive into 2 halves. The name of the god of war shocked Terra in a single day. The Titan martial arts system officially established its footing, but trouble followed one after another. Lucian's biological brother, Lucius, president of the Empire's Alchemy Association, heard of his death and spent a massive fortune to hire 3 astral thugs, killing their way to the new continent for revenge. Ganged up on by 4 astral apostles, Achilles, having just recently switched to martial arts, found 2 fists no match for 4 hands. Beaten bloody all over, he smashed heavily into the ruins. Lucius drew his great sword, grinning maliciously as he walked toward Achilles. Octavian's eyes turned red with anxiety, frantically calling for help via magical communication. Leo was far away in the Empire and couldn't possibly make it in time. Out of desperation, he dialed a special channel. Just the moment Lucius raised his sword to strike, the clouds exploded. A deafening roar shattered the 9 heavens. A 30-meter-long white leviathan descended from the sky, smashing fiercely into the center of the battlefield. It was exactly Pearl, the big sister from the Genesis realm whose friendship Leo and Colin had bought with roasted fish. Pearl swished her tail, her vertical slit pupils coldly looking down at the 4 men. Lucius shouted, putting up a fierce front but cowardly inside. This is a private grudge among humans. You, a mere sea monster, dare to interfere? Believe it or not, well, extract your magic tendons to make weapons. Pearl tilted her massive head and spat out a single word. Oh. The next second, the giant beast's massive body vanished instantly. The air popped, before Lucius could even react. He was whipped to the ground by a divine dragon tail sweep. A giant claw stepped firmly on his neck. With just a little force, crack, the astral stage alchemy master breathed his last on the spot. The remaining 3 astral thugs were frightened out of their wits and turned to run. Pearl opened her mouth and spat out a breath of absolute zero frost. The fastest running mage couldn't even self-destruct in time. He instantly froze into an ice sculpture, fell to the ground, and shattered into a mess of broken ice. For astral apostles, totally wiped out. Relying on Pearl's deterrence and Aeschylus' ferocity, the Order of Avalon skyrocketed. 10 years later, their followers expanded to millions. Octavian's ambitions swelled, and he directly established the Albion Empire, using the White Leviathan as their national totem to worship heaven and earth. Sitting high in the clouds, watching the bustling terra below, I sent down a scepter of dominion, recognizing the legitimacy of Albion. The new empire thoroughly became the holy land for martial artists everywhere. Achilles and Belisarius had no greed for power. They tossed state affairs to Octavian, paired up to travel the world, and focused entirely on polishing their martial arts. Terra flourished internally, and external star wars also reached a critical juncture. The 50th Star War. Winning this battle meant Terra could ascend to the 5th star ring, truly wrestling with the myriad races of the universe. To increase our odds of winning, I went and scavenged Quark's inventory clean, went bankrupt to scrape together 100,000 energy, and bought a Kraid God card entirely unique to this local star system chosen ones. 10 streaks of purple aura entered Terra. 10 monstrous geniuses carrying the world's fortune were about to be born. Once all this was done, the system prompt sounded right on schedule. Star War initiated. Human race versus Phantom race. The Stargate descended directly on the overseas Azure continent. The Phantoms. This was a bizarre race that could completely counter even the mech race. They were immune to 90 of physical attacks, formless and shadowless, specializing in attacking the soul. I immediately dropped a divine decree as a warning. The Terra army didn't dare act carelessly. Titus and Maximus leading the Holy Empire's elites, Octavian and Belisarius leading the Albion martial artists, plus Pearl, Emerald, and a host of hidden magical beasts, all gathered at the Stargate. The moment the Star War began, the protective shield was removed. Overwhelming black phantom death energy surged out from the Stargate like a tsunami, so thick that even satellite radar couldn't catch a single shadow. The swordsmen charging at the very front had their eyes instantly turned bloodshot the moment they touched the black fog. The death energy directly dragged out the deepest evil intentions hidden in their hearts. A Tier 9 core knight drew his sword without any warning, piercing the heart of his comrade beside him. The formation fell into chaos. Possessed descendants began to slaughter each other, and vengeful spirits took the opportunity to possess the living, controlling them to frantically butcher their brothers in arms. Watching this scene, my eyes went cold. Playing dirty, I immediately communicated with the world tree Yggdrasil in the elf territory. Yggdrasil gave an ethereal hum, and its originally 500-meter-tall trunk instantly ballooned to 10,000 meters. Rings of green ripples of life washed outward, and a holy voice resonated across the entire battlefield. Awaken! The divine voice entered their ears, and all the knights who had fallen into madness jolted, the blood-red color in their eyes quickly receding. The elf mages seized the moment to attack, hurling sky-filling light and thunder magic into the black fog like it cost nothing. Screams rose repeatedly as countless wandering souls turned to ash in the holy light. While the army stabilized its footing, my will pierced through the Stargate, scanning the enemy planet. This undead planet was only 4,000 kilometers in size, but surrounding the planet was a blood-yellow moat, the river Styx. The river water was densely packed with tumbling severed limbs and struggling evil spirits, the sky-high resentment coalescing into an absolute domain of death. This was a cosmic wonder. The main force of the Phantoms all shrank behind the river in the underworld capital city. The only entrance was a pitch-black stone bridge spanning across the river Styx, the Bridge of Lethe. I immediately issued the order for a general assault. When poor, used tactical flanking. When rich, used firepower to wash the ground. The Imperial military completely ignored martial ethics, bringing up heavy artillery and nuclear missiles directly to subject the other side of the Stargate to frantic carpet bombing. Who cares if you're immune to physical damage? The hundreds of millions of degrees of nuclear explosion heat instantly evaporated the low-level wandering souls on the perimeter until nothing was left. When the artillery stopped, Achilles was the first to charge. He bit the tip of his tongue, spat a mouthful of extremely young martial artist blood essence onto his war spear, and alone, one man and one spear, killed his way into the enemy formation. Wherever he passed, ghost bodies shattered. Immediately after, Pearl and Emerald transformed into 100-meter giant beasts, churning the seas in the ghostly swarm. The white tiger's roar shattered lonely souls, and the phoenix spat out heaven-scorching flames, forcefully burning a bloody path through the black fog. The allied forces smashed through all resistance, slaughtering their way directly to the banks of the blood-yellow river Styx. Looking at the churning bloody water, an astral mage, eager to steal the glory, sneered coldly. Playing tricks with ghosts and gods, he channeled his magic power, soared into the sky, attempting to fly directly across the river's surface. Just as he flew directly above the river Styx, his body suddenly went stiff. Countless invisible energies bit onto his magic circuits like tens of millions of venomous insects. His magic shield instantly collapsed. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, he smashed stiffly straight into the bloody water. The water surface churned, and in an instant, even his screams were swallowed. By the time he floated back up, he had turned into a set of stark white dry bones. Dead silence fell over the crowd. This river couldn't be flown over. The only path left was the pitch-black stone bridge up ahead. At the bridgehead, two abyssal guards over 10 feet tall, wearing heavy armor and holding reaping scythes, stood like two great mountains firmly clamping down the choke point. Behind them, dense formations of elite phantom heavy infantry stood in battle array, coldly staring at the Terra allied forces. Achilles held his war spear in reverse, battle intent burning to the absolute limit in his double pupils, and shouted, "Follow me onto the bridge, kill our way through them." Right at this moment, the Holy Empire's trump card was finally revealed. 15 beams of satellite-class plasma orbital cannons descended from the sky, carrying hundreds of millions of degrees of heat, sweeping crazily through the underworld capital like plows. All physical immunity became a joke in the face of absolute high temperature. Wandering souls and malicious ghosts turned to ash in an instant. The two abyssal guards guarding the bridge tried to rush into the sky to destroy the satellites, but were jointly intercepted by Achilles and Belisarius. Gareth soared into the sky on his sword, thousands of arcane sword auras coalescing into a 40-meter-long golden giant sword, which shattered the phantom infantry's defensive formation with a single strike. Over 500 lord-level magical beasts displayed their divine powers. The white tiger swallowed ghosts, the phoenix burned the city, and even the fluffy white fox transformed into a 10-meter giant beast, tearing apart swaths of heavily armored phantoms. This was an extremely tragic meat-grinder battle. 31 astral apostles died in battle, 24 magical beasts died in combat, and 170,000 troops remained forever on the other side of the Stargate. But we won. 10 days later, the prompt sound for the end of the Star War rang like heavenly music. I directly converted the Phantom Star Lord into energy. Balance skyrocketed, 2,435,214 points. Looking at this astronomical figure, and then at the captured evolvable cosmic wonder abyssal ghost domain, a crazy concept gradually formed in my mind. I was going to forge a true cycle of life and death for Terra. I unhesitatingly burned 1.4 million energy points, using supreme divine power to forcibly deduce the cosmic wonder. When only 1 million energy points remained, the wonder completely transformed the underworld. The obsidian gates, the path of woe, the judgment throne, Tartarus, the river Styx, the bridge of Lethe. A complete set of laws that only existed in myths was forcefully manifested into reality by me. Next, I spent the remaining energy to level up the planet twice, forcefully carving out two boundlessly vast independent dimensions at the top and bottom of Terra, the heavenly realm paradise and the earthly realm the underworld. I smashed the underworld wonder into the earthly realm. Soaring death energy instantly transformed that space into the netherworld. From this day forward, Terra had a cycle of reincarnation, equipped with the laws of merit and sin. Those who did good deeds would enjoy blessings in Elysium after death, or even be reincarnated into a good family. Those who committed evil would go to Tartarus to suffer endless torture after death. The heroic spirits of the warriors who died in the Star Wars were all drawn into the underworld by me, becoming the first batch of Death Reapers. But the underworld was too important. Official posts absolutely could not be snatched through martial force. To guarantee absolute fairness, I stripped away all my emotions, transforming them into a desireless will of heaven, completely taking over Terra's tribulation lightning and divine appointment selection. Heaven and earth are ruthless, treating all things as straw dogs. After doing all this, I looked at my nearly depleted balance, gritted my teeth, and spent heavily to buy a Kraid God card entirely unique to this local star system chosen ones. Since we were going to pull off something massive, we had to give Terra an explosive boost in its foundational heritage. The God card turned into 10 streaks of purple aura falling into Terra. 10 monstrous geniuses carrying the world's fortune were born on the exact same year, month, and day. In the Holy Empire, the philosopher Socrates and the scholar Plato were born. In the Albion Empire, Caesar, Constantine, and Alexander were born. Charlemagne of the Gaul Kingdom and Richard of the Kingdom of Britannia successively came into the world, along with St. John, who attained enlightenment under the olive tree, and the grand Magus Hermes, living in seclusion deep in the mountains. I gave them a full 100 years of growth time. During these 100 years, Terra completely ushered in a golden age of 100 schools of thought contending. Plato traveled across the nations, received pointers from Socrates, and created divine word magic, embodying talent within his body, making his spoken words literature, where poems and songs could all be turned into magic to kill enemies. St. John sat withered under the olive tree for 7 days and 7 nights, comprehending divine revelation. Heavenly holy light descended, and the Church of the Holy Light was established. But the most terrifying was Socrates. Holding a wooden staff, he did not cultivate magic power, only comprehending the heavenly Tao. The moment he vigorously wrote down the Ethereum principles, heaven and earth resonated. The voice of the the great Tao echoed across Terra, forcefully breaking through the rule suppression of the interstellar cloud. Exactly 2,000 Ether Core Ascendants stuck at bottlenecks heard the truth and broke through to become astral apostles on the spot. Terra's combat power ushered in an unprecedented eruption. It was time. I sneered, decisively clicking to promote to the 5th star ring. The moment the star ring promoted, alarms wailed wildly across Terra. Exactly 20 star gates simultaneously tore open the sky across Terra's major continents. The Elder Dragon Legion, the Phantoms, the Mech race, the 4 great elf races, the 6 great orc races, the myriad races of the universe had plotted this long ago. Terrified of Terra's unreasonable rise speed, 20 civilizations united to completely erase Terra. All forces, form ranks. Emperor Valerius stood high on the platform, drew his imperial god sword, and a roar shook heaven and earth. Titus led the Griffin Legion to fight the dragons. Maximus led the Behemoth Legion against the undead. Scipio led the Phoenix Legion to intercept the Phantoms. Albion's Octavian, Belisarius, and Achilles personally went to battle. Charlemagne and Richard the Lionheart sent out their entire nations. The Church of the Holy Light, word mages, elves, dwarves, and even the 500 hidden magical beasts all entered the fray. This was a global melee unprecedented in history. The moment the stargates opened, the dragon race gave Terra a show of force right off the bat. Thousands of massive two-legged wyverns dove down, blotting out the sun and sky. The Imperial ground laser cannons and satellite orbital cannons fired at full capacity, shooting the wyverns down like dropping dumplings. But immediately after, the real trouble arrived. Hundreds of elder red dragons braved the laser net and dove down, opening their mouths to spew dragon breath of tens of thousands of degrees, instantly melting the Empire's energy shields. The human mages' counter-magic smashed onto them without even scorching a single scale. Elder dragon talent, magic immunity. These giant beasts, born as war machines, were extremely cunning. They fundamentally refused to fight positional warfare with you. Relying on their ability to fly, they directly spread out, breaking into smaller units, charging toward all corners of Terra. Green dragons vanished into the jungles, relying on camouflage to ambush the elves' world tree defense line. Blue dragons spat wild thunder, wreaking havoc in the thunderclouds. Black dragons hid in the night, using their terrifying physical strength to tear apart mechs one by one. Terra's defense lines were instantly severed. Flames of war ignited everywhere, and wails filled the fields. Astral apostle level mages and sword saints soared into the sky one after another to engage in brutal aerial hand-to-hand combat with the dragons. The slightest misstep meant being burned to ash by a mouthful of dragon breath or being torn alive by dragon claws. The sky full of dragon blood fell like torrential rain onto the lands and oceans of Terra. Countless flora and fauna that couldn't dodge in time were drenched in dragon blood. Some couldn't endure the overbearing energy and exploded to death on the spot, but many more surviving creatures, after absorbing this precious dragon blood essence, fell into a deep slumber. As the torrential rain washed over and the dragon blood seeped into the ley lines, a banquet of unprecedented mass species evolution, sweeping across the entirety of Terra, quietly commenced amidst the mountains of corpses and seas of blood. But this evolutionary dinner was eaten in a highly tragic manner. The most disgusting among the dragon race were those dozens of silver dragons. Spatial magic was impossible to defend against, and they consecutively beheaded 11 of our astral archbishops. These heroic souls who died in battle for the human race were directly sucked into the earthly realm by the heavenly laws, becoming heroic spirits draped in baleful aura. At this time, although the underworld was not yet completely built, it had already become the final resting place for the fallen. Over 30 million lonely souls and wild ghosts endured endless loneliness and cold in the desolate netherworld. Only ascendants who had powerful cultivation in life could barely maintain their sanity and begin groping for the path of undead cultivation. The mortal battlefield was even more of a chaotic mess. On the eastern battlefield, 10-meter-tall elephant men charged rampantly bearing heavy armor. Lasers hitting them didn't even make a splash. Caesar's teeth ached just looking at it. In the end, it was the young Commander Alexander who was ruthless enough, grabbing Serena from the poison cult to command thousands of light mechs to dive right under the elephantmen's crotches and charge directly into the Stargate to spray poison gas. The elephantmen's backyard was on fire, and they desperately retreated in panic. The great Magus Constantine seized the opportunity to strike, using water mist, vines, and freezing spells to crowd control and attack continuously, finally rubbing out an apocalyptic combination forbidden spell meteor shower, forcefully burning the area in front of the elephantman's star gate into purgatory. But the most intense battle was still Maximus against the 3 great undead races. The undead skeletons were endless, and the laser weapon's energy was almost depleted. Just as the defense line was about to collapse, Plato brought 6,000 scholars to the front lines. They recited classical texts in unison, and righteous truth light shot straight into the clouds, respectfully requesting the Firebringer to descend. The heavens and earth trembled. An aged figure surfaced within golden light. The human civilization's progenitor Ignis, the Firebringer. The old man looked at the fiercely struggling descendants, possessing an imposing aura without anger. His withered right hand gently waved, and a pinch of pure white flame ignited in his palm. The flame fell into the undead army, instantly turning into a prairie fire. This fire was wicked. It burned upon contact, burning even the Death Knights until not even their ashes remained. To maintain the summoning, the word scholars spat blood and collapsed in swathes. Ignis looked at us, revealed a gratifying smile, and dissipated into smoke. Maximus, his eyes red, reverse drew the previously captured abyssal relic, roaring loudly. Undead scourge. Countless terra skeletons crawled out of the underground, following the army and directly counterpushing into the enemy's star gate. The most satisfying part was still fighting the dragon race. 500 holy dragons paraded their might in the sky, relying on their massive size. Pearl and Emerald, the two leviathans, directly transformed into their 50-meter true forms, bringing over 500 hidden high-tier magical beasts to pounce on them. Discovering that magic couldn't hurt the giant dragons, these magical beasts simply stopped pretending and engaged in close-quarters melee. They stuck to the dragon kings like plaster, opening their mouths to bite. That nine-tailed white fox was the most ruthless, anchoring itself onto the dragon's back with two tails, biting left and right, forcefully tearing large chunks of flesh and blood straight off the 1,000-meter-long dragon king to swallow raw. The dragon king was bitten alive until it crashed into the ground. Seeing his big sister eating until her mouth dripped with grease, Leo got greedy too, running up to carve a piece of dragon meat to roast and eat. Upon discovering it could enhance magic power, all the human swordsmen and mages present went crazy. This wasn't fighting a war. This was clearly an Aleocaniate buffet. Before the hundreds of giant dragons could react, they were dismembered on the spot by the reedied human army, and even the dragon eggs were snatched clean. As for the sea monster race, even more laughable. These seafood creatures, relying on their star gate being in the deep sea, hid in the water and crazily taunted. "Come over here if you dare." As a result, Serena of the Poison Cult directly developed a sea vine toxin exclusively for countering aquatic races. Hundreds of astral mages charged into the sea with water-repelling pearls in their mouths and frantically poisoned the area. The deep-sea giant crabs that were arrogant a second ago all turned belly up the next second. The human ascendants steamed large lobsters right on the spot and netted all the rest back to Terra for seafood farming. This apocalyptic war of 1 against 20 was forcefully turned into a reverse plundering by the Terra army. But I wasn't in a rush to end the Star War. According to the inside info Quark gave me, as long as you don't occupy 51 of the enemy's land, the Star War won't settle. So I forcefully exploited this bug for 100 years. For this 100 years, Terra ushered in a golden age of frantic development. The mech race's tech tree was carved clean by major factions like the Holy Empire, Albion, and the Gaul Kingdom. Dragon blood soaked the ley lines, breeding mountains and plains of sentient high-tier magical beasts and magical plants with innate skills. The Ascension world directly spawned the two highly lucrative professions of alchemist and beast tamer. It wasn't until 100 years later, when the myriad races had been completely hollowed out, that I ordered the end of the Star War. The moment the settlement notification rang, I swallowed hard looking at the panel. Balance skyrocketed. 8,765,800 points. I struck it rich. I threw down 9 million energy points directly to give the underworld a massive upgrade. The Obsidian Gates, the Path of Woe, the Abyssal Hound Lair, the Pyramid of the Dead, the Judgment Throne, the Hall of Illusions, Tartarus, the Bridge of Lethe. 16 core buildings rose from the ground. Terra's cycle of life and death was completely closed. Over 2 million soldiers who died in battle under the canonization of the heavenly laws donned black armor, held soul-reaping scythes and chains, and became the underworld's first batch of Death Reapers. In the sanctuaries and temples springing up everywhere in the human realm, good Samaritans who had done good deeds in life reported straight to work after death as guardian angels, enjoying incense offerings from the mortal realm. Just as this massive machine of the underworld officially began operation, and countless lonely souls and wild ghosts queued up to drink from the spring of forgetfulness to reincarnate, an inconspicuous little event occurred in a remote small town in the Albion Empire in the human realm. A young man named Enoch, born with severed meridians, unable to sense ether, practice martial arts, or even learn magic and divine arts, had just been ruthlessly laid off by his boss. He and his two similarly afflicted younger brothers, Ezra and Elijah, went to the wild mountains to drown their sorrows in alcohol. Enoch went to relieve himself midway, got lost in the thick fog, and stumbled into a cave by mistake. Inside the cave, an old man wearing a cloak with no face stood silently. The old man waved his hand, and 3 pitch-black parchment scrolls fell into Enoch's arms. On the cover, written in blood-red font, were several large words, the Book of Chaos. The old man dissipated into a clear breeze, leaving behind only an earth-shattering prophecy. Preach civilization on behalf of the heavens, save the people of the world. If you harbor treacherous intentions, you will surely suffer a wicked end. I am the faceless prophet. Enoch clutched those 3 volumes of the Codex tightly. Within his originally dim and lifeless eyes, the ambition and fanaticism of a starving wolf suddenly erupted.